All right, Jeff, you ready to roll? Okay, we'll call this special meeting, emergency meeting of the Rockport Select Board to order on Tuesday, June 5th. I'll call it an emergency meeting because of the short notice required where we have a timely issue coming up, and so that's the reason that it's put that way. I want to start actually by reading from the Charter, Town of Rockport. Article 1, Section 5, School Administration. And I'm again reading from the charter here. Rockport voters elect by secret ballot representatives to serve on the SAD 28 and 5-town CSD school boards. Although these elected school board members serve in accordance to state law and the bylaws of the aforementioned boards, they are elected to represent the interests, concerns, and public education-oriented ambitions of Rockport residents, and as such should be responsive to concerns and requests for information and dialogue with Rockport Select Board committees and boards and the citizenry in general. And I want to say at this point that I think that the school board has been very responsive to the select board over the past month. We've had presentations at a meeting earlier in May from the superintendent, and Linda Chilton was there for that night, which was an excellent presentation on the state of the schools. And then given the situation that evolved in our second meeting last month, we had a presentation from Carol, from Kathy, regarding the situation. So I want to thank all those people for fulfilling this part of the Rockport Town Charter and being very open and cooperative with the Rockport Select Board. Going on, reading from the Charter in Article 2, Section 7, Powers and Duties of the Select Board. It says, the Select Board and all other municipal officials either elected or appointed by the Select Board represent the executive branch of the municipal government, of which the Select Board members are the chief executive officers. The duty of the Select Board is to execute the will of the people, to manage town affairs, and to provide leadership and oversight on issues of importance to the town. Providing leadership and oversight on issues of importance to the town certainly allows us to talk about the school situation. However, in my opinion, and others may differ, the Select Board does not have oversight over the school board. The school board operates within their bylaws as stated in the first part of the charter and within state law to manage the school district and to provide their duties there. So I just wanted to start with that as a bit of a context as to why we're here today. Our agenda has basically two items on it, discussing whether or not to issue a statement and to determine the content of any statement. Before we get into that, I'll ask the other board members if they want to make any statement to start with.
Sure, I'll start. Sorry, running dogs, open doors, you smash your head. So I was kind of the person who called this, I was referring to the cut on the forehead. I was the person that kind of called this. So I just want to say first that I'm not opposed to the new middle school at all. Though I had reservations, I voted in favor of approving the $25.2 million bond. I feel strongly, having sat on the visioning and the building and visioning committee, that the school did make a very compelling argument that that facility was in need of some major renovations to the point to where new construction made the most sense. My primary concern is around the additional spending to close this gap due to the rise in construction costs and potential rise in interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, I personally am not opposed to the middle school. Believe that my daughter would be the first class that would be in that middle school. Education's a very important thing to me. That said, being able to afford to live in this community is also a very important thing to me. And I am just concerned about the quickness for which this package was put together. I'm concerned that I don't think maybe the bulk of the citizenry fully understands the tax impact. I very much commend the school board and the administration for explaining the different components to this, explaining bond premiums in depth, explaining the deferment of the first payment, explaining all those things. It's been very helpful and very beneficial. The reason that I felt it was important to write a letter to the citizenry and see if the select board,
Okay, I don't want to get into that yet, because that's
Oh.
the next agenda item. I just want, before we get into agenda items, I wanted to
could
see
go
if you
on,
will
so
make
I'll
that-
just stop
that sort of
there.
felt that. So does anybody else want to make a brief opening comment from the board?
and thank you all for showing up on such short notice.
The next agenda item is to discuss whether or not to issue a statement on the MSAD middle school project in time for publication in this week's newspapers. The in time for publication is the reason for the quick turnaround, and as Owen said, thank you all for coming. I'm glad to see a nice representation here this morning. And deciding whether or not to issue, and I understand, I put this on the agenda for basically of one reason, and that is that, deciding whether or not to issue a statement will, for many people, the answer to that will be it depends on the next agenda item, unless there isn't the thought here that we need to issue a statement at all. If there's feeling that we should not issue a statement at all, then we can decide that and we can go home now. So that's why I put this item on the agenda right here. And I have to say, myself, I'm not terribly in favor of issuing a statement. I feel that the school board has done a reasonably good job of explaining things to the community, and the community has to make up their own mind on this based on the information that we have. I think the select board has fulfilled its oversight role by having the school board members come to our various meetings and to getting the full explanation of things. But if the other three members want to go ahead and discuss it, then we'll go on to talk about a statement.
Yeah, I guess at this point, I would be in favor of issuing a statement, and I can give a little background, I guess, on that. I certainly don't believe that we have any oversight of the school board, and since being elected last June, I've tried to stay out of this, and, even today, I'm not trying to tell the school board what I think they should do. On the other hand, as you pointed out, the select board does have oversight of issues affecting the town, and I finally felt that it would be worth having something for us to say about this, so I am in favor of the statement. When I was elected, I was sort of elected that on the principle that there are three things that people expect from their town government. One, and probably number one, would be public safety. Number two is infrastructure. And three is good education. Having been through my first municipal budget process this year, when it was painful that as a municipality we were counting paper clips to try to keep our costs down. And as I sit back then and I look at what our municipal budget is versus what the school budget already is, it made me feel like the school expenses are now starting to just suck the energy out of other projects we might want to do involving infrastructure and public safety. So, having said all that, again, as a select board, I have some opinions about sticking to the original amount that the taxpayers approved, and I feel it's legitimate for me to put my views out there, and like you say, have the voters have the final decision.
Having had a 22-minute conversation with someone last night on the phone, of which 17 surrounded the school budget and the increase in cost associated with the bid, I can say that this couple is more than capable of paying the additional taxes, but they're not particularly keen on how things are getting to that point. For the extra year, the smoke and mirrors, I think is what they called it. And I, too, would be willing to look out for the best interests of our taxpayers. Although the majority of them voted in favor of the school, there are those that still are struggling to make ends meet, and every year that things go up, things get tighter. So I'd be willing to discuss it as well.
Okay. So it sounds like the board is willing to discuss a statement of some sort. Owen, I know, drafted a statement. I don't know how we're going to deal with going through this because
Question. At what point does the public get to participate in this conversation?
I'm willing to be pretty loose with that. If people want to make a comment at any time, raise your hand, and I'm happy to recognize you. We'll try to keep the time somewhat limited, obviously, and if you do want to make a comment, you do have to come up to the table and sit and by the microphone. So if, at this point, I'm happy to entertain that. And please identify yourself for the folks watching at home.
Yes. I'm Marcia Dietrich, a member of the school board from Rockport. I'm going to make just a brief statement because I have an appointment and I cannot stay for the rest of this. But as you consider moving forward, what I would like to point out is there is no future path for this project that is less expensive than what the school board is currently pursuing. In fact, there is no path forward without the project that is less expensive in the long term.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to make a comment at this time?
Good morning. My name is Carol Gartley. I represent the school board for the town of Rockport. While I appreciate your authority to call this special meeting, I think you've really isolated a lot of folks who work and that were not able to attend this meeting. I'm glad it's being live streamed. However, it doesn't allow them, while they're at work, to come back and participate in the meeting and perhaps ask you questions and advocate. So I'd like to first say that. Secondly, I also appreciate your point of views, and I think as individuals, you certainly have every right to express your concerns. I wish I had heard any of your concerns. Not one of you has reached out to me specifically as a school board member. I don't know if any of the school board members or building committee members or principal of the middle school or business manager for our district has heard from any of you folks. So to me, that feels not okay. And so we did scramble together. We're here. We have a presentation again that I hope we get to explain again why we're doing what we're doing. And as Marcia pointed out, we will never be able to build this building at this cost again. And we've been above board. We've been transparent. And so we look forward to talking to the four of you about this and how we can work together as community members, because we really are community members. And it's unfortunate to think that the select board is coming against the school board, when in fact, I don't think the school board would be coming against the select board. So I'll talk to Ken, because he's the chair. So that's my point.
Okay.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else have a question? You want to make a comment, Owen? Go ahead.
I'm sure. Have you all read the document that I wrote up?
I have, yes.
Did you feel like it recommends folks to not vote for this?
Yes, very extreme.
Because I
Clear, yeah.
definitely stopped short of recommending to vote against it. I wanted to make clear what these different tools meant to the taxpayers.
But Owen, we've done that. And because you have never.
You have to come up to the mic.
Right, we were here last week, and we presented this information. We have more information to share. I've taken that information, I condensed it, and you have it in front of you. And because this was called so late, you probably didn't even have time to look at it. But your letter is clearly a charge to the voters of Camden and Rockport to vote against this middle school project. There are inaccuracies in this letter, and there are misconceptions in the letter. So it saddens me that it's gotten to this point, that here we are being really at this last-minute meeting when we don't need to be. And Mark, to your point about increasing taxpayer burden, we all are very much aware of that, and it hits us all as well. So it's a tough situation for sure.
It's been like 19 days since the bid was open, correct?
I
19?
haven't counted, but.
So and I definitely didn't, I've been under the weather. I was literally in bed all day yesterday, so I apologize that we weren't able to broadcast this more. But I think that everyone has been scrambling because of the quickness that all of this has progressed. I mean, it's been roughly 19 or so days since finding out that the project was 26% over budget till today. That's a very compressed period of time.
let me ask the board, I know that Carol mentioned that they have a presentation, we have it in front of us. Do we want to ask her to go through that? Do we feel that we need to do that? It's not dramatically changed, I don't think, from what we had a week or so ago. A little compressed, I guess. Okay.
The fund balance was a new one, and then the
Well, do we want to, maybe we should ask her to go through that.
And
I think
also
that probably would be a
the,
good idea to frame what we're,
the additional bond as well.
well, let me take first.
Hi, I'm Anastasia Fisher. I'm a resident of Rockport, taxpayer here, and I'm also been on the building committee for the last year. Of course, I was as surprised as everyone when we found out that the bids came in higher. And I was shocked because I can't really, frankly, can't afford an increase in my taxes either. However, when I was walked through the details by all the people in the planning and also was reminded and shown facts and figures about the changes in our economy, I come to understand why this discrepancy happens. Okay, I am really, really concerned that if you, as a select board, decide to put a statement forward, it should be an unbiased, clear statement about the issues and this real situation, not, some extrapolation into other conditions, but actually discussing the real things that are driving this change. Instead of, I think that's super important, and I think you have a responsibility to the town to represent things accurately. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to make a comment at this time? Yeah.
My name is Katie Uri. I am not on the school board. I am a parent of 2 middle schoolers and an elementary school student. I'm a Rockport resident, and I'm here at the last minute because my phone was blowing up this morning from other concerned parents who heard about this last-minute meeting and can't be here. All of them share my concern that there are a few things that we talked about. One is we don't feel that the select board needs to issue a statement. The school board has been very clear. They've been very transparent. I don't agree with the idea of smoke and mirrors. I think that Maria Libby's letter came out when the budget was exceeded. They realized it was over budget, and they worked really hard to figure out how to bridge that gap and how to be really clear with us about why. And I personally believe that we're above budget so much because of the other last-minute scrambling where people, the project was pushed off, and that caused more cost increases. The economy changes. I feel strongly, I have many other friends who couldn't be here who feel strongly that we don't want this pushed off. And if you, as a select board, issue a statement that is adding more, I guess that what I feel like it's adding more fear to the residents, that this is going to raise your taxes, and it gets everybody all just fear-based, and I don't think that that's necessary in this case. I really don't, and I don't think that the residents need to hear from the select. I don't think that the residents need to hear from the select board at all about this. I think that that's what the school board's job is. And I think that adding your opinion, especially if it's something like this, where it really feels skewed to vote no on this, we're going to be without a school. And on a very personal note, I have subbed in the school. I said I have 2 children in the school. I've seen what the building is like, and I feel so strongly that we need a new middle school. And if you come out with a statement that's urging people to vote no, which even if that's not how this seems to you right now, I urge you to read it again, because I think that is the tone. I think we're going to be in a really bad position. And as you beautifully said, this can't be done at a less expensive cost. So I'm kind of confused about why the select board would be issuing a statement. I think that that was sort of the tone of the messages I was getting today.
Thank you. Owen, comment?
So because I was kind of the driving force behind this, I drafted it up. I've reviewed every one of the meetings that the school board has had. And one of the bigger concerns that I had was, well, I mean, there was a lot of different concerns, but when the school board and the administration says, other than pushing the first principal payment off 1 year, there won't be any rises in taxes, I don't feel like that's an accurate statement. I think that there will be significant tax impacts on the taxpayers. And so what I was hoping to accomplish with this draft letter, that I am happy to take edits, happy to take corrections on any falsities that I may have, I wanted to make it very clear the different components in this package and what the tax impact would likely be. Just simply to have a, yin and yang, that counter, okay, so, and if folks want to vote in favor of it, that's perfectly fine. I just want everyone to be very clear about what the impact will likely be, because when I read statements like, other than deferring the first payment, there's not going to be an additional burden, that just doesn't seem to make sense.
That's why we brought our business manager here, and we have another board member who's the business manager of RSU 13, to help you understand.
Do we have any other comments? I think what I'd like to do is ask Carol or somebody to go through the presentation. It's much the same, but certainly highlighting what may be different from what we heard last week, and I think that'll give us a basis on which we can move forward if we decide to. Would that be all right?
Yep, I'd like to include Captain Mark.
Absolutely, yep.
Also, who's a board member.
Yep, the more the merrier. Grab another chair if you need one.
So, Jeff.
Jeff, do you have this up?
Ready?
We can put that up.
Starts with projected project timeline, I think, if that's the right
Yes,
document.
yeah.
You'll have to, you'll need to hang on one moment.
So this was put together very last minute, again, because of the short notice of this meeting. I took this information from Maria Libby, our superintendent's presentation that she's going to be presenting this evening to the Camden Select Board on the state of the schools, much like the presentation that she gave to you folks, the state of the schools. What, so I
So
just
just
swipe?
grab this. Can you see that?
Hang on just a second, let me get it up to you.
So just scroll down 2 fingers.
2 fingers. Anywhere on it?
Anywhere, just
Notes on this and then just attach it. We're good.
Okay, yeah. So we'll start with the projected project timeline. It is already shifted because of putting off our bid opening. Originally, our bid opening was going to be in May, and because of the unfortunate construction bid amount and our efforts to try to figure out how we were going to manage and bridge that gap, we have put off the bid opening until after the June 11th district vote, because if it gets voted down, then we won't be able to put this school project out to bid. So that pushes back our groundbreaking to July. We had hoped to start already. That makes us nervous because already construction costs are going up. But this is the situation we're in, so we are hoping for a July groundbreaking based on a positive vote. In the summer of 2018, that will be the Phase 1 demolition of everything but the Mary E. Taylor building. And then we will continue through so that we have our grand opening in September 8th of 2020. So some key information.
So Carol, that's the summer demolition for this year. Only partial building. You said everything but grade.
Oh, sorry.
Very limited part of it.
Thank you. Because it'll be going in phases.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Matt.
Or do you want me to move? I thought that's what you gave her. It's not working. I'll do it.
Is Diane now in?
No, say it.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I thought he gave it to you to do, that's why I wasn't
Yeah.
doing
But
it.
you having trouble?
It wasn't working. Or I couldn't make it work. So some key information, again, this is not new information, it's been out there all along for folks, that the expected project cost was going to be $26.3 million. $25.2 million from the bond that voters, 68% of the voters approved, the $25.2 million bond. And that was the bond amount. In addition to that, we were going to use $1.1 million from our capital reserve account so that the project cost is $26.3 million. The expected construction costs are $21.4 million with the $1.1 million bid contingency. So that leaves us $22.3 million available construction. As many people have heard, the low bid was $28.1 million for construction, which leaves us the $5 million gap. Continuing on this key information, again, what we've been talking about over and over is that the market has shifted in the past 4 months. I would say even more than that, over a year. The construction boom in Maine is pretty significant, particularly in the Portland area. There's difficulty finding contractors, subcontractors. The construction costs are increasing. Another school budget that was school construction bid that was over was the Caribou project, and they were over by 25%, and they were opened a week before us.
Can I ask a quick question? Going back up, where's the 5% contingency? Is it built into some of these numbers? Is it, because I don't find the 5%.
That's the $1.1 million bid
1.1 million
contingency.
contingency right here.
So that 1.1 million is the 5% contingency?
There's a 5% contingency that's not part of the construction thing, that's part of the other.
Soft costs, the soft
costs.
costs.
That's how we get the $22.3 million available construction. The difference between the 22.3 and the remainder is the soft cost. So that goes to architectural costs, attorney fees, permitting, those sorts of,
And 5% project.
and, yeah.
So there's another 5% in the 28.1 million. So there's a bid contingency that was the 1.1 million. In the 28 million, the contractor also includes contingencies for construction costs that are not defined yet.
Okay, thank you.
I do need people to come to the mic, I'm sorry, but if you can just grab a mic there, because this is being live streamed,
Yeah.
so.
I just want to say, being on the building committee, this thing about the limited contractors bidding is actually a very, very significant issue. There are quite a few schools that have been approved for being built in Maine right now. And we only had 2 contractors bid on this job. So that means, and there's a whole slew of schools behind us that want to get in the queue. So if we don't respond by a certain point in time, they're open to taking these other schools and going forward with working on the other schools, which leaves us down the road. Imagine I think it's 7 schools or something like that are in this queue. That means that if we do not get our bid, we do not get a contractor, that means we get put behind all these 7 schools. And that cycle, if you look at the terms, I mean, our cycle here is 2 years long, right? If you look at putting us then back behind those 7 bids for a whole new cycle, we're looking at way down the road. And I urge you to look at the projected increase in cost that would happen with that many years down the road.
Thank you, Ms. DeJong.
I'll add one thing to that. It's not just schools, it's other government buildings. It's also the private sector. The private sector is driving a lot of this construction, and so municipal projects are not as attractive as the private sector projects. So we're falling farther and farther behind the longer we wait with some of these projects.
Wait a second, I have a question. So we're gonna break ground, right, July 2018, okay, and then we're gonna site work complete in 2020. But we've been drawing down the amount of the bond that we have over that construction timeline. And even though we're drawing down that $25.2 million bond, you're projecting $450,000 of interest. And so what I'm curious about is, if we were to wait and let that bond sit, wouldn't we accrue even, I'm just curious, Anastasia, I'm just curious.
Let me answer this one.
You need to come up here.
But
We can't hold on to bond proceeds. According to statute, we have to spend the bond proceeds within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
So we couldn't accept a bond and let it sit there for 2.5 years and not spend any on construction.
Okay, thank you, because I was just trying to be clever there for a
It's-
second, but I'm
it's
sure there
illegal.
was a good
Let's
reason.
let Carol get back to
Yeah.
where she was here so we can progress through
And
this.
I appreciate the cleverness, because that's exactly what we've had to think outside of the box. How can we do this? And so, again, asking help and constructive thinking is what we're asking of folks instead of roadblocks. So what's important also for taxpayers to know is that we've spent over $1 million just to get to this point. So if this gets stopped, that has just been a wasteful expense. Anything else, you guys, on that part? Peter? All right, so our path forward is, given the situation, to intelligently and rationally accomplish the objective passed by voters at 68%, to build the new school within reasonable financial parameters. So we looked at all of our options, and here they are: a combination of value engineering and additional revenue sources. So we will talk about each of those individually, and they are highlighted in your packet. So the first one is value engineering. The architects and our contractor are putting together a list of all potential items that we could value engineer. And value engineering, for those folks that aren't familiar, are just making choices on items for the construction project. Some of them might be painful choices for us. Some of them might be easy choices. But ultimately, everything's on the table, so we can look at how we can reduce the cost of this project, maybe up to 10%. And that's the goal, up to 10%. We can't guarantee that. We haven't seen what the contractors and the subs have come back, so they're putting together a list, and then they send it out to the subs. And then it'll come back, it'll go to the building committee on June 19th, and then the building committee will send it to the board, and the board will take a look at that on June 20th. So that's an important bit of information. Any questions on the value engineering?
I do. Peter, it seemed like at that last meeting you felt pretty strongly that if we could get away without value engineering anything, that was a potential route. And I mean, I for sure agree with you. All things being equal, would we want to keep all those great aspects in the school? Yes, of course. Do you still feel that is something we should be trying to get to?
Personally? So, there's three areas that I see that we're trying to use to fill this gap. One is cutting the expenditure, cutting the amount we're spending. That's the value engineering. Personally, I think that so much work has gone into the design of this over the last 3 or 4 years, and creating a middle school that will be an asset to both our communities of Rockport and Camden. I'm not inclined to want to start cutting back on that. I think our middle school is the shining star of our entire school system here, between K through 12. It's doing so in spite of the building, but I see it also being the weakest part in terms of its attractiveness to bringing new families to both our communities. So I see by cutting the project, we're cutting the attractiveness to potential families moving to the area. So on this list, it's to me, the least attractive to me personally. I'd rather see us generating revenue, which I think we've identified in terms of interest income, using more of our savings, the capital reserve, as well as fund balance. I think we've got a very, very strong fund balance, and we will continue to have so even in future budget years. I think we've already committed to raising the extra $1.3 million in next year's budget. That was approved in the last budget meeting, and then will be validated at the referendum on the 12th. I think that the bond premium is a hedge. I think that the bond premium by itself gives us the flexibility to make choices down the road. Just because we take a bond premium, which really is just committing us to a higher interest rate over the term of the bond, doesn't mean that we have to spend it on construction. We can, at some point, decide to fund that differently. We can choose to use the bond premium to actually pay down this current bond. I mean, it gives us flexibility. So to me, the bond premium is not a foregone conclusion. It's got to be paid. It's got to be done in a certain way. It gives the district flexibility. And I think that in a project this size, the board and the community needs as much flexibility because things are going to change. That's the one thing we know. Things are not going to be as smooth as we anticipate. Things are going to change. Construction is going to change. Something is going to change. We're going to, in construction, they'll say we'll hit a ledge.
Are you saying that we should anticipate actually higher costs than what the
No, I think
school
that-
board? Well, I mean, that's kind of what you were just
I
saying.
think that it gives the ability to have the contingency in case there are other unexpected. It could be cost, but I don't think it's going to be, because I think the guarantee is the $28 million from the contractor. But in terms of, maybe I say that, I would have personally chosen to go forward with a bond premium much earlier to cover some of the contingencies like they're seeing right now. So I think we're seeing that, and I think we're kind of, it appears that are scrambling because we're going back and trying to recreate what we probably should have done in the first place.
So if we keep, did you have anything, Kathy?
No, I just having said that, I do think at that meeting, Owen, you were there and I was there, I do think there were other school board members who want to also take a serious look at that value engineering and weigh out all the options that they have and what is the best balance of funding and what is the best balance of value engineering that we can come up with. So-
And that's actually what is on the warrant for the June 11th district meeting, is giving the school board the flexibility to take a look at all of that. And we'll get to that warrant article in a second, but if we can we keep going?
Yeah,
or-
please.
Okay. So that's the value engineering. The next one is the bond premium. And just so folks, again, understand that bond premiums are additional money from the lender that is financed with the loan. So it's a common practice. Many of us had never heard of this. And so I guess this is a great educational moment for those of us in public service to learn about bond premiums and how common they are and how common they've been used locally, as it says on the monitor and on your handouts. The Midco School of Technology, which is part of the CSD, did take a bond premium, and RSU 13, our neighbors in Rockland, took a bond premium within this past year. So this is a financing decision that the board can unilaterally make, as other districts have, but our board has decided to include this as part of a warrant article on June 11th for a district vote. This is different from the June 12th budget vote, and we will clarify that continually as we go through the presentation. But we are being transparent and letting voters know that this is something that we're asking them to give us the flexibility to do what's best to close this gap. And then this, I'm not sure if I'm correct, and I didn't get a chance to ask Kathy about this, that there is a provision, if we don't get the bond premium, we can issue bonds instead, and I put up to 1%, was that correct?
It's up to 1% of the member town's previous state valuation. So according to statute, the school board does have authority to go out and get bonds for up to 1%. of the member town's property valuation, without voter approval.
The town's valuations?
The town's,
So
Camden,
we're
that's
like a
Rockport.
billion
Owen
dollar,
school
Yeah.
funding is based on town
Correct.
valuation.
and Camden's like a 1 point something billion dollar town.
Correct.
So that's $25 million plus or so that
Yeah,
you all could
it's-
get with that 1%.
Correct. It's much more than the 3 million that the school board is asking for voter permission for, but that is in statute.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
School, yes, yeah. This is also included in the warrant article for June 11th. Again, that's a district meeting, not the budget vote for June 12th. So that's the bond premium additional bonds information. Next is deferring the first bond payment. It is common practice to defer principal payments on a construction project where they pay interest only. We originally were going to pay that first year principal and interest payment in this first budget year. And so we are asking to defer that principal payment for that 1 year and pay interest only. We would use the amount budgeted as a principal payment in 2018 to go directly toward the construction costs, which is 1.3 million approximately. We need voter approval at a district meeting to do this. It takes 2 steps. One step happened on May 22nd, where we moved money into the capital reserve account.
Correct.
And the next district meeting will happen on June 11th, where we are authorized to spend that money.
But question. So it's common to defer principal payments during the construction period of a loan and pay interest only. Is it common to use that principal payment towards construction costs, or do folks typically hold it and pay just the interest and then use that to pay the next year's principal? So it is common to spend that money?
No. So what we're saying is common is typically, oftentimes when schools go out and get a bond, their first principal payment is deferred until the following year. So what our school board had decided to do was, because it would cost in the long run, if we had that first full principal and interest payment in the first year, in the long run, it would cost the taxpayer less money in interest over the life of the bond. Okay, so if we had not used a financial advisor and gone to the bond bank automatically gives you an amortization schedule that defers your first principal payment into that second year. So people don't typically put the first principal and interest payment into their first budget year, then defer that payment and use that payment. That's not typical. What we're saying is typical is that oftentimes, in the majority of the instances, schools defer their principal payment a year, that first principal payment a year.
Thank you
Does that-
very much. No, that is very clear, and that is actually just kind of one of the reasons that I wrote the document that I wrote, was to just try to offer a little bit slightly different perspective on what is common and what is not common. So
But
thank
if you
very
had asked
much.
us, we could have explained that to you.
I didn't have to. It was in my statement. I
Yeah.
figured it out
Yeah.
by myself.
And perhaps I didn't explain it clearly enough the first time, Owen.
Thank you.
Any other questions on deferring the first bond payment? Okay. Other revenues that we have looked at in our current budget that we are accessing money. We have gym floor insurance claim money that we've held of $60,500. In the capital reserve budget, the district can afford to take additional money from the capital reserve. The 1890 budget places an additional $275,000 into that fund. The fund balance, the district can also afford to take up to $100,000 from the fund balance. It's like our savings account and still have a very healthy balance. And lastly, the district will make approximately $450,000 on interest income from the $25.2 million bond in the 2 years during construction.
Question. The fund balance number went up within the last few days. What was the rationale? They just found more money?
When I had given Maria the estimate, it was what was going to be left in the fund balance at the end of the year. I gave her a very conservative estimate, and I said there could easily be an additional 100,000 left in that fund balance. But because, I mean, I think Rick even said it at the last meeting, it's such a moving target at the end of the year. Expenses are coming in, and you're not really sure where the budget is going to wind up. So I gave Maria a conservative estimate of like, I think it was 75,000 and I said it could easily be 100 grand more. So she bumped that up to 100,000. I think from 75 it may have been previously.
Because we're closing down our fiscal year, just like you're closing down your fiscal year. So it gives us a better window, better understanding of what we have in our lines.
Your fund balance is similar to our fund balance, where you could use that, you can encumber it for things next year, or you could defer taxes, or you could
Yep.
put it
Correct.
towards construction costs.
Correct. We could assign it for certain purposes, or we could leave it unassigned. Yeah.
And I was trying to conceptualize the interest, because I very much appreciate being clever and finding that, hey, let's make our money work for us, and we'll take that and we'll reinvest that money. I love that thinking. And I didn't run any of the numbers on this specifically, but how did you, or how did whoever advised, come up with that? Because it's a 2-year construction time period, give or take. And so I'm just fascinated that as we draw down this amount, we're still somehow generating. So is this a huge amount of interest in the first, before we start doing drawdowns, and then a small trickle as we continue the drawdown? I'm just fascinated by it.
What it is, it's a combination of using the Money Market Now account and then, a combination of CDs, like a 12-month CD and a 24-month CD. So my financial advisor actually did this analysis for me, and he took the architect's drawdown schedule. So here's how much you can anticipate to draw down your loan in the first 4 months. Here's how much you can anticipate to draw down from the 4-month to the 1-year period. And so our financial advisor took that drawdown schedule and said, okay, you can have, and I'm just using this as an example. This is not the specifics of his analysis, but so you're going to have $8 million, over the course of the loan in a Now account, and that collects 1.8% interest. And you can have $10 million sitting in a 24-month bond, and that's going to collect over 2% interest. And then that's how we came up with the $450,000. And there's a theme here, but even that's a conservative number, the $450,000.
If that interest is somehow not generated, I hope that it is, the plan for closing any sort of gap, if that interest is not generated, what's the plan with that?
Well, it would be like anything else. If, we would have to, if we have more expenses that come in over budget, we'd have to find areas to save that money. So if we don't make that whole $450,000, and again, that's a conservative number, then we would need to look elsewhere to cut funds. Maybe we'd have to lease some equipment. I mean, it would be similar to that value engineering, and I think at the end of the end of projects, that's not unusual to have to do that type of thing. Maybe we put off purchasing some equipment that was part of the construction project for a year, or maybe we lease equipment that was part of that construction project.
Okay.
Anything else on other revenues? So our next point is, why is this money being moved around, and why is there a meeting on June 11th? There are no regular budget articles that allow spending for school construction. Other than approved debt service, the only other place to spend money for construction is from our capital reserve fund. Transferring money to the capital reserve fund and spending it both require voter approval. And we have a warrant article every year to do both things. In this situation, we need to move all the additional revenue sources into the capital reserve fund and get voter approval to spend it. That is why we need the June 11th district meeting. These moves do not impact the 2018-19 budget votes on June 12th in any way, as it is not additional taxpayer money. The money has already been raised. And we've used that term before and people get confused, but raised is a common term. That means that it has been part of our previous year's budgets and we have put it aside. And Kathy, did you want to explain that anymore.
I mean, I guess I would just explain that, and especially if the select board decides to move forward with the letter that you had put there, I'd be very careful in that first paragraph. You mentioned both the June 11th and the June 12th budget votes, and I actually think that's a little bit more confusing to the taxpayers, because these additional funds that we're trying to raise and spend are going to be, we're asking for voter approval for that at the June 11th meeting. The only thing the June 12th referendum does is approve our total budget, so Articles 1 through 14 of the warrant articles that were approved at the May 22nd meeting. So the June 12th referendum in the towns is only to approve the budget that was approved at the May 22nd district budget meeting.
Any questions on that section? On the June 11th meeting, any questions about that?
Well, on this, in italics, these moves do not impact the 18-19 budget vote on June 12th in any way, and is not an additional taxpayer money. So I think that's potentially what some folks are referring to as kind of the shell game, meaning when you take the fund balance and you take the capital reserve money, we will be appropriating in the 1920 year, probably far more additional monies to make up for what we've taken out to close this cost now. And so though the money is already appropriated, it leaves these funds in a pretty unhealthy place that we're going to want to get back up, because it's a smart thing to do. And so I think that's what folks may be referring to when they say something of that nature, that though it is accurate to say this is already appropriated taxpayer money, you're going to have to ask for more money next time to fill that gap, because you have taken every, and understandably so, every pot of money here and there and are bundling it all together and spending it.
Could you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, Pete, you can add in if you think I've forgotten anything. I don't think there will be a significant taxpayer impact next year due to the moves the school board wants to make regarding the Camden Rockport Middle School building. So we already have built into the budget, we're already raising $175,000 in the 18-19 budget, to move over to the capital maintenance reserve. We've been doing that for a number of years now at higher levels. So that $175,000 is already in the 18-19 budget. It will continue to be in the 19-20 budget. So that doesn't raise.
I thought you said we were going to try to do $250,000 for the 19-20 budget.
We're
or am I confusing my funds?
You're confusing your funds. So we transfer over 250, but in the regular budget, we're raising $175,000 to move over into the capital maintenance reserve at the end of the fiscal year. So that $175,000 is in the 18-19 budget. It will be in the 19-20 budget. It will most likely be in the 2021 budget. So there's no increase there to the taxpayer, because we're going to continually fund that capital maintenance reserve and have been.
When did we start doing $175,000?
Well, we had been doing more than that, and we started doing it the year after the first middle school vote failed. So we had been raising quite a bit more than that. I think at one point it was up to $325. So we could build that fund balance up, and that was in order to reduce the amount of the bond if this vote had this last vote passed, or to use to fix up the middle school if the vote did not pass. So we started doing that, when was the last vote? So maybe 3 to 4 years ago. So for 3 or 4 years, we've been raising that money in the regular budget.
So there'll be continual contributions to the reserve fund in coming years at similar levels to what we have this year.
Correct, and then
So you'll build that fund up again for its purpose, which is the so-called rainy day fund for
Correct,
furnace
correct.
breaking or something
Yep.
like that.
Correct.
And I think it's important to note that, the capital reserve fund is more important when you have an aging school. I think because it's a contingency fund for roofs, walls, foundations, things that, add youthful life to the building. When you replace an old building with a new building, the need for the capital reserve fund is diminished. But the, but
Two
the.
buildings.
But the necessity of maintaining one is still important, because even though your operating costs might go down with the new building, you want to put at least that money aside that you would have been spending on the older building, or part of it, for future expenditures. So you know in 20 years, you're going to need a roof. You know there's certain things that you'll need even with a new building.
Yeah, and I am not, I think we talked about this at the last meeting as well, as far as accepting the bond premium on the bond. The interest expense is not, I mean, over the, I think we were estimating over the life of the 20-year bond will be an extra $1 million. So yes, over the life of the 20 years, that $1 million is significant. But if you look at it as a increment to a person's tax liability each year, it may be $8 per 100,000 between the two towns. So in 1920, there's a potential that that interest and principal payment will go up from what we have budgeted in the 18-19 budget. But I don't think it's going to be a significant amount if it does go up.
Because when I did the tax calculations on the percentage rate difference, the 3.05 to the 3.5, and I know it's a crapshoot in the markets,
Yeah.
et cetera,
Yeah.
but that was coming in at over $2 million of
Yeah.
additional costs over a 20-year loan.
Yeah, well, I guess we'd have to compare our comparisons, because I came up with $1 million. I'm looking at the amortization,
And
two
I
different
totally-
amortization schedules.
I used an online mortgage calculator
Yeah.
to where I plugged in the numbers, and when I posted it on Carol's, on that Facebook comment, I
Didn't
said.
read it.
Oh, you didn't?
Nope, it was too long.
Carol, have you pretty much wrapped up? You
I
finished?
haven't.
Okay, well, why don't you
I'd
go
like
ahead?
to get to the prognosis, because I
Yes.
put that word in there for you.
Yep.
I did. So the prognosis is that, Diane, you might want to, if you can.
There you go.
There we go. There will be no change in the 18-19 tax assessments to Camden and Rockport due to any of the above changes. So that impact is still what we have been speculating all along. It's around $100 per $100,000 of value. There will be little to no change in future expected annual tax assessments for the next 20 years. The financial impact to taxpayers will be in the year 2038-39. We will have a payment that year that we didn't originally anticipate. So yes, that will be the extra financial impact on voters. So just to give did you have a question? Doug? Okay, so the final path forward review. Combination of value engineering and additional revenue sources to build the new school. So value engineering, up to $2.8 million. The bond premium or additional bond, up to $3 million. Defer the first principal payment, $1.3 million. Money from the gym floor, $60,500. Unassigned fund balance, up to $100,000. Additional capital reserve funds of $400,000. And interest income of $450,000. And that is all that we are going to be asked for voter approval on June 11th district meeting, and that's the warrant article.
Okay.
Can I, if you think,
Yeah, do we want to go through the warrant? We have that warrant article in front of us, or
no, go ahead. Yeah.
just, I think you've sort of touched on
They're all
everything
right
that's
there.
there, but just to be clear so that everybody understands what's going on. This is, I don't know whether
It's all scribbled.
Jeff has that or not. It's just the Article 1A and Article 1, and I think you've already talked about this for the most part, but ask the board to just look through it and see if there are any questions. I don't think there's anything here that's,
Yeah.
doesn't
I'm-
jive with what was
I'm
in
just
your
wondering if Rick
presentation.
can find it to email it to.
Yeah, I'm looking now, yeah.
I can,
Be just a sec.
I'm just looking now.
No, that's a presentation. I think it's.
Oh, Doug, why don't you go ahead with your comment, and
All right,
while Rick is finding that.
Okay, so, Carol, thank you for that detailed review, and I hope
It was
that it
the
gave
one
Owen sort of a chance to get some of this out of his system. But kind of going back to the 30,000-foot view, the 68% of the voters approved the $25 million budget. That's what was approved, and the fact of the matter is that we're still $6 million over budget. No disagreement there.
no?
So I guess as a select board, I guess that's what concerns me. And again, I feel it within my right to at least have a comment on that. So what I would find to be more helpful to me, rather than just reviewing the numbers we've seen before, is if we could go over the statement that's been drafted, and perhaps you people could tell us where it is in error or slanted in a way that you think is inappropriate. So could we do that now?
Point of order, I guess, are you assuming that you are going to issue a statement? Is that
Well,
on the agenda?
I'm saying that
We're
I'm still,
discussing it, I think.
I'm saying going back up to the 30,000 foot, the
Right.
fact that it's a 25 million, that was approved by 68% of the voters, that's over budget, I'm still in favor of issuing a statement. But I want that statement to be clear, that it's, honest, open, and forward.
I agree, and I
And
think,
I'd like to go over with you guys and have you review it with us and say, no, that's inflammatory, no, that is true.
I guess from the 25,000-foot view, a little lower, I'd say that, while the construction bid came in at $6 million over what we expected, including that bid contingency, half of that is being raised internally through the district. And then so the other
Yeah,
half.
but where did that come
So
from? Where did that come
so that's
from originally? It didn't magically appear there.
It didn't, it was,
It was taxed from the people.
well, right. I'm not
Okay,
saying it
all right.
wasn't, but the 3 million has already been raised and approved by voters. It's the 3 million, it's the additional 3 million to me
Okay.
that we're asking the voters to come on the 11th and discuss with the school board and make that decision. I think to me, it's the.
But again, that money's been raised.
Well,
But
the second-
the bond was for $25 million. That's what was put before the voters.
Right, and as part of that,
Not-
so as part of the project, which was 26.3 million, 1.1 was already raised internally. We're just saying that 3 million more can be raised internally. It's the 3 million extra, the bond premium or the issuance of bond. That's what I think, in terms of being transparent, that's why we're asking the voters to come to a meeting on the 11th to discuss that portion of it. So this is just me talking about splitting it up a little bit more generally than just 6 million. 3 million to me is the school board's prerogative to raise internally, which already has been done. The additional 3 million, and whether it's bond premium or issuing the bonds based on the 1%, that's where I think we're looking for the voters to either support or reject that idea.
And maybe with that, we've got the warrant article up here, maybe we should run through that real quickly, and then we can continue the conversation, and then go to the potential statement.
So I'll start the way, for folks that have never been to a district meeting, we elect a moderator to preside at the meeting. And then we have one article. At our previous district meeting, we had, how many articles?
Probably 17 or 18.
17 or 18 articles. And so now we are opening this one article. And the article states, in addition to the current funding sources for the new Camden Rockport Middle School project identified below, shall the district, A, appropriate $400,000 from capital reserve fund balances for the project, and B, authorize the school board to make additional fund transfers of up to a little over $1.4 million to the capital reserve fund for the project as described below, and appropriate those transferred funds for the project, and C, authorize the school board to accept and use bond premium in the amount of up to $3 million for project construction costs, in addition to premium for issuing costs described below, and to the extent the board does not accept or receive such $3 million bond premium to issue additional project bonds, and appropriate those bond premiums and/or additional bond proceeds for the project. And then we have a chart here for you with, again, summarizing our current funding sources and additional funding sources if this article is approved. And again, this gives us the flexibility to look at the big picture and say, how can we do the best that we can do for this project, and move it forward.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on the warrant article?
I think I must have misheard way earlier in our conversation. I thought, Carol, you said that the value engineering was on the warrant, but it's clearly not on the warrant, so I must have misheard you.
I don't recall
I don't remember you saying
that,
that, so-
and if I did, that was,
Is there any way
because
of...
that wouldn't be something that taxpayers would vote on.
I know, but wouldn't that be, well, a lot of this stuff is stuff that taxpayers don't have to vote on, but you're asking them to. And so I'm curious, has there been any discussions, I mean, not that I've observed, but of putting the full 10% of the value engineering in there as a cost reduction?
We could, we're not really looking, what we're doing here on this warrant article is raising the, getting voters to approve the additional funding sources. So there are other documents that we have out there that list, okay, here's what we were over on our budget, and here's the value engineering, and here's the additional sources that we're asking for. So I don't really think there's, I don't really think there's a place for it on this article. This is all about funds being raised, not necessarily about expenses.
And this doesn't preclude the board's ability to do that. So this just allows us the flexibility to raise the money if we need to. If we value engineered $2.8 million, we certainly wouldn't need to raise as much money. Even if we took the bond premium, we could then take the excess bond premium we don't need and put
Pay it
that
right
back
back.
towards interest.
Yeah.
The nature of my question was trying to contain costs and have a vote that compelled you to contain costs in at least some small aspect. That was the nature of the question.
And I'd say that's our job anyway. Like it is- like
And
it is
if I
for-
could,
It's your job, yeah.
the bottom line total initial fund is 4.8, you need 5.8, so that would seem to me that you've got to value engineer at least
Correct.
$1 million.
Correct.
Of the possible 2.8. So it seems like it's built in there somewhat, again, with some flexibility for them to do a little more and then maybe take a lower bond premium or something of that nature. Correct me if I'm wrong on my assumption.
That's correct, Ken.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to go back now to Doug's point of going through the possible statement and asking the school board folks to comment on it? And I'll say at the outset that I do agree that this statement has a tone that I wouldn't approve right now, because I do think it has a negative tone to it, as was mentioned, and I know that wasn't your intent necessarily, but it does come across to me that way. Some of the language is that way. So in its current form, I couldn't vote for this statement. I remain a little reticent about issuing a statement in general. I think the conversation this morning, my opinion, the conversation this morning has helped a lot of us understand what's going on a little bit better, and I'm hopeful perhaps that we can move forward on that basis.
Doug, I'm wondering if you'd be open, I mean, it's hard to wordsmith existing letters and I'm just wondering, we've gotten feedback from our presentation to you folks, and that presentation was posted online in the local media outlets. We've received feedback that folks have said it's very helpful and very clear because it's bullet points. And I'm wondering if what I've presented to you today might be an opportunity to, again, post that. It's just an idea or a combination of the two.
Well,
Unless there's something specific that you were
well, again, the
looking
issue
for us
that I
to see.
keep coming back to as a taxpayer is that what was approved at the bond and where we are now with the bids.
Yeah, but Doug, that's unforeseen, and you know,
I-
and
I understand
I know
that.
you do.
You know.
So how do we move forward? So are you just saying,
Well,
what
I
do you
think
want the voters to know that we haven't told them already?
You build a school for 25 million or whatever the original bond was. And I realize that's difficult, but, if I was building a house, all right, and I ran into, and I've been through this, where,
Me too.
it costs more than you expect. Yes, you do fiddle around as best you can with the numbers, but the bottom line is you go back and I'll also tell you, this value engineering gets under my skin. Being a local bumpkin, we call that cost cutting. My wife does without a granite countertop, and we use Formica type stuff. So this value engineering, might fly at, a municipal meeting or something. But
Well, that's a construction term. I mean,
I
we're
know,
using,
I
we're just
know.
using the language, so,
I know.
but you're
I'm
right,
a
you're
country
right.
bumpkin, and if you're, talking to the voters out
Yeah.
there.
But you would
you're
also,
cutting
in
the
your
cost.
financing of your house, you might hope to have a 15-year mortgage on it and then realize, oh my goodness, I can't afford that because my cash flow would be so low. So I'm going to extend it to a 30-year mortgage and thereby extending your interest payments, and then you will be paying even more interest on your mortgage. So you're right that
Still
you.
paying more interest
That's
on it.
right, and
Still paying more
we are
interest.
not denying that. There is no
The
smoke
point
and
is, this
mirrors
is going to
here.
cost the taxpayers a lot more money than they originally voted for, okay? I mean, you can put
Well,
lipstick on a pig.
Yep, I mean, it's definitely going to cost them more, for sure.
That's all I'm
So
saying.
I mean,
And-
we've agreed to that.
And the
We're not hiding
statement
that at
that
all.
we heard from the administration prior to the vote was if put in this situation, we would not spend more. And that statement is now removed.
I don't remember them saying if it was $6 million over budget. Did they say that? Did it?
The statement on the Middle Matters website
Oh,
that
you're
clearly
reviewing too.
says if we find ourselves in a situation where it comes in more than the 26 point whatever million, we will not go above that and we will rein this project in. And the exact opposite is happening.
I can't speak for the school board on that, but I'm sure when that statement was written, they did not anticipate it being $6 million over budget. And again, I can't.
But now,
Right, and I understand, so now they're trying to use the best mix to get the taxpayers something close to what they approved. And again, I shouldn't be speaking for the school board.
Pete, did you have a comment?
I was gonna say, I don't remember what it was now. I mean, I agree with Doug that we'd like to get the taxpayers' input and their confirmation on spending more. I think that's the purpose of the June 11th meeting, and that's why, even though not required, the school board and the administration has decided to do it in this manner, to make sure it was beyond reproach. I would love to see this kind of discussion at the June 11th meeting, because I think that's the appropriate venue for that. I think that's where we can have the discussion with the taxpayers of both towns and discuss whether they would approve the extra $3 million in bond premium, or however we decide to discuss that. And I would love to see, instead of a letter from the select board, a joint letter from both towns' select boards and the school board together, encouraging people to come to that meeting. Because that's where I think, we do a lot of our best business, is in a town meeting forum. And that's the purpose of the school budgets being done in that process. And that's why we're doing that in this process, because that's the forum where we can get a give and take and get the good questions being asked.
below are links to the recent news articles and school board meetings where these aspects are discussed more thoroughly. We appreciate that the district has been extremely transparent in their approach. We encourage all voters in Camden and Rockport to review the discussions had by the school board so they can make up their own minds and join us to vote on June 11th at 6 p.m. in the Camden Rockport Middle School Gymnasium.
That's a great letter.
Yeah, right
Just
there,
that.
just that.
And I think the school board would sign that, and I think the town of Camden
I
might
think
sign
we'd
that.
all
This
sign that.
whole thing that we've just done, have we not already identified that there are some discrepancies between statements in here and statements in here where we're saying it will be no tax impact, no tax increase, and yet you're agreeing that there will be tax impacts and increases.
Not next year. I think it said there'll be no tax impact next year.
And I'm a great person is one who plants a tree whose shade they will not sit under. This is long-term planning. This is for the folks in 2040. This is not for the folks next year or the year after. This is a community that has to pay for a lot of stuff. We've been taxing them extremely high to the point to where we are barely sure if we're going to be able to pass a $3 million library, only half of which the taxpayers will pay for. Camden has wastewater infrastructure, sewer infrastructure. Municipal projects
So
will
I think
very
it's-
much suffer
I
because
think it's
of this.
important, though, that we allow the voters to make their decisions. So by giving them the information, we've been presenting the information. We trust that our citizens of Camden and Rockport are intelligent enough to make their own decisions. And so So you clearly feel passionately about your position, and that's your position, and that's okay. But to try to sway everybody else isn't okay.
And
I
you don't think that this is swaying people in the other direction, that we have been?
I feel like we're
that we
just
are
laying out the information.
given the situation
on-
to
Ken.
intelligently and rationally accomplish this.
We spent close to an hour going over their presentation. I think we can spend a little bit of time going over what some of us have proposed as a letter.
Well, let's look at this, at the statement. Can we bring that up on this? Oh, it's up there, okay.
And again, we're looking for input. What is incorrect? What is inflammatory?
Yeah, I think that's a good way, is to start at the beginning and work way down through it. As I said, right now, it requires, for me to support it, would require a lot of wordsmithing. I'm more in the camp of, let's put the information out there, but let's go through it and see what we can get. If there are factual inaccuracies which were stated, let's get those out, and certainly the inflammatory language. I don't know if we're gonna be able to wordsmith this thing here this morning to get it so that everybody will be happy with it, but let's
We need
start.
is to get three
I'm-
happy
I'm
with it.
just
So
being-
let me go down here. I'm just going to go ahead and start, Owen, because you've sort of dominated the
Thank you.
conversation. In the first paragraph, second line from the bottom of the first paragraph, I could see that where it says we not allow the school district to cobble together. Perhaps we should say to assemble. Would that?
Can I ask a question? I'm wondering, just for folks at home, if it would be, I know they kind of have it on screen, but if it would be helpful to read each section and then talk about each part of it, and that way it gives the flavor and you can hear the whole tone of the paragraph.
Well, we
And that's
could
just
do
my
that.
idea. Thanks.
Okay, well, I'll ask, Owen wrote it mostly, I'll ask him to read it then.
Hello, Camden Rockport residents. At the special MSAD 28 meeting on July 11th, and I struck, and on the, I'm sorry, June 11th, and I struck on the June 12th ballot vote, we will have decisions to make regarding the future of our middle school and impact to taxpayers. One of those decisions is how to best deal with the new middle school project that recently came back from bid 26%, or $5.8 million over budget. Regardless of how individual members of the Camden Rockport Select Board voted on the original bond, all of us support a robust educational experience for the youth in our municipalities. The choice before us on June 11th and struck 12th is not about building the new middle school. The choice before us is whether or not we allow the school district to cobble together an additional spending package of $6 million together in order to close the budget gap.
And I would agree, that last sentence, for me, I can't stomach that one. We have to, have to write something else in there about, the choice we have is how to manage the shortfall or something like that. And it's hard to wordsmith on the fly, but that last sentence is, I believe, inflammatory.
Do you want our input on
Absolutely,
this?
yes.
Or, this is just me personally, I don't like that last sentence as well. I mean, we have other board members here, and I think the important phrasing is,
Well, I'm happy to just strike the last sentence. I mean, I think the real meat of the matter is in these.
Yeah. In
next
fact, for
five
that matter,
paragraphs.
the sentence before could go, too.
I'm looking at.
It could just end with, robust educational experience for youth in our municipality. I think that makes a good introduction to what we're all trying to do, the select board and the school board. That would be my
Because the
suggestion.
11th, the vote on the 11th, not the 12th, is about whether this school can go forward.
yeah.
And it really is. I think if we're trying to value engineer more than $2.8 million, it's a whole new project.
Right.
And that's going to require, a brand-new concept and then a new plan. So I would agree that sentence should be stricken.
What's the board's pleasure on that?
Well, again, I don't know what the rest of the board feels like. My thought would be to end that first paragraph at the youth in our municipalities, period. End it there.
So what everyone wants to do?
You have to wait for them.
I don't know,
Owen?
like I say, it's
I will say that I wrote this document primarily to try to have the board support it as an educational counter document to some of the things issued by the school board. I am happy to cut things out if that is what gets folks to mutual agreement.
Well, from a factual standpoint, the issue really is, it's not about building a new middle school. I see their point, but yeah, again, I can live without that sentence. I want to get into the meat of these things here.
Okay, the proposed spending package aspects of concern include, do we want to go over that sentence?
I don't like it. I would say.
Well, I mean,
This is not
having the
gonna work.
word concern in there implies
Yeah, I
that
think
you
that's right. I mean,
don't-
I think, the proposed, I don't know, budget
How about
adjustments.
the
or
proposed spending package includes? Just takes out aspects of concern.
Or the changes. Yeah, it's really, these are just changes
Yeah.
to the original.
Yeah, the proposed budget changes, or
Well, they're
something
not-
of that nature.
Yeah, it's not
It's not budget,
funding.
It's the
funding.
raising or the, how we're raising the
It's not-
funds.
yeah.
No, we're not even raising.
Proposed
it.
changes in the funding of,
Changes include, I think is
Changes
probably what
include.
they're looking for.
It's just simple,
There you go.
yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
Changes include.
That's it.
A bond premium of,
Wait, she's
Oh,
live
sorry.
editing.
oh, and I will do a first edit while she's doing that, is I put $3+ million, and that was based on some of the feel that I was getting from watching the meetings. I'm happy to strike that because clearly the warrant says up to $3 million and not more. So we would strike the plus on $3+ million.
And include up to.
A bond premium of up
to.
to $3 million. This function comes with higher interest rates at taxpayer expense. Over the life of the bond, these additional interest payments would easily exceed $2 million. A bond premium of this magnitude is not typical and is usually used to pay down the overall bond amount, not put towards additional cost overruns. This form of spending by school districts is illegal in some states.
To Doug's comment, this is the meat, in my opinion. This is the meat of the question that we're going to be asking on the 11th. Because it's not just about bond premium. You know, the way the article's written, it's a choice. This extra $3 million can be raised through bond premium, by the acceptance of bond premium, or it can be raised by issuing $3 million in bonds according to the statute allowing us to raise up to 1% of valuation. This is the kind of, to me, the key point that we're looking for the voters to weigh in on, whether this project can go forward with that additional $3 million.
Can I ask a factual question here? Because this came up in our discussion, is it says will easily exceed 2 million on the additional interest, and is that incorrect?
I think it's, again, a little inflammatory.
I do too,
Because I
'cause-
think there's
Well,
a,
that's not what we're asking.
Yeah, is it factual?
Is it factual or not?
No,
I
I
don't
don't
think
think it's
so.
factual. I mean, you're using 3.05 from when we first put the information up 2 years ago. The climate has changed, and the the amount of interest expense we used in the budget was 3.5%. So if you're looking at the difference between that 3.5 and, what the new interest rate may be with the 3 million, the difference is about $1 million.
Okay, except that the citizens, and I understand the citizens voted on a bond amount, not an interest amount.
Correct,
However, they
correct.
voted on a bond based on information that was presented by the administration, and if we are altering that information, then it should be noted. And so if what the citizens approved was information about a $25 million bond at 3.05, then they should know that the additional new projections, what those are. That's the nature of why I'm going back to that. And I understand that the markets fluctuate, and I understand all of that. I can understand where you all are coming from. But to say that it's not somehow, and I just get frustrated there.
Would it be more accurate to say, and again, I'm looking for accuracy, that the interest payments will possibly exceed 1 million?
Additional?
Additional.
Yes, could possibly exceed 1 million.
Over 20 years.
Yeah,
Not
over
per-
20 years.
Over 20.
Yeah.
Can you pull up the mortgage calculator thing? And then can you explain
This
to
is-
me
this is-
how
so
a mortgage calculator is
This is not a mortgage. And so
But
bond-
interest rates, money's
No,
dollars.
No, this is the big misconception. A bond like this is like 75 different mortgages blended into one. They have coupons attached to them. They don't have interest rates attached to them. They have coupons based on the principal amount. They are, fixed in terms. I mean, this is not one security. This is a list of, it's like 70 different securities that are going out, and it's got a blended rate, and we hire a bank to actually work the principal and interest similar to a mortgage, or similar to what we call a mortgage, but it's really hard, and it took me a while to kind of really understand this, and I spent a lot of years trading bonds on Wall Street, so I've got a conceptual knowledge of this. So to compare them to a mortgage calculator is wrong. So
Except numbers are numbers, and so if
You're-
you do,
But the first bond could be the first bond that matures in the first year could be at an interest rate of 1.85%. We could be paying that at 1.855%. The bond that's maturing in year 20 could be at 3.67%, which, really is going to skew the amount of interest that you pay over the life of the loan. And the other thing is, you could refinance 1 or 2 or 3 times in the life of that loan, in the life of that bond, and get a lower interest rate. So you can't use a mortgage calculator because of those reasons.
To me, this is too simple, because we could raise the $3 million through bond premium, which I would agree, raises your effective annual percentage rate. So if we were the market we were a few months ago, and the interest rate that we would get blended would be 2.8%, the additional $3 million of bond premium would make it our effective interest rate of 3.5% on $25.2 million, because it's really a prepayment of interest. The other way of raising this money is actually to issue $3 million of premium and go into the voters and asking them to raise $3 more million of principal, which would then be at the lower interest rate. It has the same net effect, but it's two different approaches, and I think this is misleading because because the bond premium is being presented as something that's smoke and mirrors. This is to me the crux of this whole issue. Is $3 million is what we're looking to get authority or permission, because we have the authority, to put into this project. This is the portion of the $6 million that we think that we need some flexibility from the voters based on market conditions, whether it's interest rate or construction costs. This is really what I think, in my opinion, we're asking the voters to help us confirm that we're making the right decision for everybody in the two towns. So I would love to see this wordsmith.
I wonder if this would have passed before if instead of 25.2 million, it had been 28.2 million.
That's the question. To me, that's the underlying question. I agree.
Well, the first vote was for that, and that included the MET project,
and it didn't pass.
And I
and it
would-
didn't pass.
Well,
And I would,
You
I mean,
know?
we could argue all day as the
Yeah.
reason for that.
Yeah.
And I think that the visioning of that project was less than the visioning of this project. I think
Right.
this project was much more clear as to what the school district was looking to build in terms of education system, not just a building.
And we have a different board.
So what's your pleasure on could exceed 1 million? I'm cool with that.
And I would suggest putting, again, I'm not sure I'm going to approve this thing in the end anyway, but I'm wordsmithing with thought in mind here to try to make it as factual as possible. I would put in parentheses, after life of the bond, 20 years, so that it's clear the timeframe we're talking about. And also, the last sentence has to go, in my opinion. This form of spending is illegal in some states. We're in Maine. We're not in any other states.
we're not
It
in
is,
California.
It's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant, yeah.
My opinion.
That's what I said. That
And
was
I'm
my
glad-
note,
and I'm glad we're
irrelevant.
not.
Yeah.
Okay, but
It is factually accurate, though. Factually accurate.
yeah, it is, yeah. Okay,
Is it okay for her to take that last sentence out?
yep. By me.
This form of
This form of spending by school, yeah, just take the
All
whole
of
thing,
that?
take the whole thing out.
Just listening.
Can I ask a question?
Just listening.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask the board members how they feel about that previous sentence. A bond premium of this magnitude is not typical and is usually used to pay down the overall bond amount, not put toward additional cost overruns.
Well, you can ask the board that, but my understanding is this is why this is illegal in some states, because they didn't want people using that extra money to be used for actual construction costs.
Right, but it's not
And that was,
illegal here.
that was based
So
off
I
of
think-
statements from
I
your
think
own
it's-
bond counsel.
We're trying to work together, though,
And I
and
was-
so that's why I'm bringing this up.
And I'm
So I,
Yeah, there are people out there, Carol, that might be uncomfortable with that. Yeah, I think we
but there
have
are
to
things that are
acknowledge that.
illegal back and forth, Doug, and I think that's getting in the weeds and
We struck,
really.
no, we
in the
struck the
weeds.
illegal
Boy,
part.
we've
We
been
struck
there.
the illegal
But
in
it's
other states part.
detracting from really the
So,
meat of it, as Peter described, the crux of the 3
Well,
million.
and I might have looked to Pete to help here, because I think Pete said, this is the crux of the matter. How do we include a sentence that says that
Right.
this is the crux of the matter?
And that's,
without-
that's all I was asking if I, when I said I'd like to ask our board,
Yeah.
because I thought we were working together.
can I throw something out there? So, you all referenced Midco School of Technology and RSU 13, and they did the bond premium recently. However, their bond premium was on the order of $100 and something thousand.
No, the Midco School of Technology took about over $2 million of bond premium.
And they did Geo,
They added to their project. So they took about half of it and used it to pay down the first year's interest. So they used half of it to reinvest, to temper the tax impact that they hadn't budgeted for in this current fiscal year. The other half, they added to a project that they believed had cash flow benefits long-term. So they use it for a combination of things, and that's the same way that RSU 13 used its bond premium, and it didn't take the entire, RSU 13 took bond premium up to a certain amount to keep the tax impact at a certain level. So, RSU 13 was, was doing budgets based on 3.25%, 3.5% interest, and so we wanted to make sure that the bond premium didn't put us over that in our overall blended rate for tax impact. A lot of that bond premium has not been decided as to what to do with it. Part of it has been used to pay down interest, but because RSU 13 is in the same position as MSAD, because of the type of construction that we're doing, we're being hit with certain types of cost overruns now after the approval. So some of the money will actually be used for construction. So if there's a way to temper that statement, I don't disagree with the factuality of it, but I do think that it's not common. Maybe it's not common over a long period of time. It is common over recent years, because in a rising interest rate environment, bond premiums are more likely to happen, because people that are buying the bonds, the public in the bond markets, want to have bonds that have a higher coupon attached to it later on. So the only way they can do that is through bond premiums.
so you all discussed at your meetings forcing a bond premium versus kind of a market rate bond premium. When I wrote that sentence, it was based on observing your bond counsel, his recommendation that 3 million is basically as high as you could go, because once you go beyond 3 million, you're starting to push the envelope. He was also referring to forcing a premium, working with his certain underwriter friends to ensure that we get this premium, all of which led me to believe this bond premium of this magnitude is pretty atypical, or else you would just be going with the market and you wouldn't have to be working with your old underwriter buddy friends to get you a bond premium. And that I also gathered that typically, like you just said, it's a balancing act trying to bring down some overall principal costs so you can kind of manage your interest rates and things of that nature, more than it is typical to put it towards all of it towards additional construction costs.
So that's a good point, because forcing the bond premium is not that common. And I think that's a good point to pick up. But what we're forcing by asking our bond bidders to include a premium is not the $3 million bond premium. Because typically, again, in a rising market, in a rising interest rate market, when the long-term yields are rising slowly, the short-term yields are rising very fast, long-term very slowly, the buyers of bonds want to have a higher coupon. And so bond premiums are part of that process. So in terms of forcing the bond premium, the typical bond premium in this market right now, it has been for the last 2 years, is about 10% of the principal amount. So we were going to get, in my opinion, at least a $2.5 million bond premium as part of this package, because that's what everybody who's bidding on these is going to include. The
An
forcing
offer.
come-
It would be an offer.
It's an offer. And
Yes,
the
an
forcing of that is taking it from $2.5 to $3 million. The bond premium is something that is part of the offer. I mean, we're actually going to take a bond premium no matter what, because that's what the offer is. The difference is, if we decide to take only $25.2 million, not $28.2 million, we'd actually lower the principal amount on the entire offer, which, again, would free up the board from issuing the other $3 million later, at a later date. So the forcing is the extra $500,000 of bond premium, not the entire $3 million. I don't think we needed to force anything in this issue.
So I don't have any.
Just another point, you know, when I don't understand something, I tend to start getting
Yep.
suspicious.
And I guess I mean, where are we going to go with this sentence?
But I think, I have a question about this function comes with higher interest rates. Do we know that for sure?
A bond premium comes with higher interest rates,
Okay,
yes.
I just want to understand, make sure that we're
Factually
being
accurate.
factual on everything.
Bond premium actually is the interest rate increase.
Well, let's come back to this. I'm not sure where we need to go there. So the next paragraph, you want to read that, Owen?
Deferment of the first principal payment. This will take the first principal payment of $1.3 million and use those funds towards construction rather than paying down the debt. While it is not unusual to hold the first premium payment for use in future payments, it is uncommon to spend it for current construction. This will also extend the 20-year bond by an additional year. Oh, you wordsmithed that a little bit from what I had.
First thing I have to do is correct the spelling
Correct
of
the spelling.
principal.
Yeah,
Principal
thank
is
you.
P-A-L on the end, not P-L-E.
And what I was trying to get across with that statement was that it's typically that you hold,
Yeah,
and you're saying that is not typical.
correct. That is not
So it is
typical.
always spent.
No, I think it is not budgeted.
Yeah, I was
Most
say,
people
often,
do
I
not
know in the
budget.
town things we've done, often it's not budgeted.
Correct.
You have the first payment is interest only, and then in the second year is when that bond payment ramps up.
Correct.
So it's typical that it's not budgeted.
Correct.
But in
So-
this instance, it was budgeted.
Correct, because that's what our intention was,
Yep.
is to get a amortization schedule that had us paying the first principal payment in the first year.
So we're,
So we're saying the second sentence is not correct?
First sentence.
This,
I'm hearing the first
no, I
sentence.
think the second sentence.
Oh,
I think the second sentence, if that came out, I think that would be a more accurate,
yes,
accurate
second
statement.
sentence. So keep the first and the third.
I'm not super comfortable with that because on the factually accurate, I'm just trying to be factually accurate. This was a
Okay.
budgeted amount.
Yeah, well, you could just say, while it is not unusual to hold a first principal payment for use in future payments, that's based on a misunderstanding. That part of the sentence is based on a misunderstanding. Most schools don't even budget that first principal payment. So that's based on if you write that, it's gonna imply that, while it is not unusual to hold that,
So while it is not unusual to defer the first principal
Correct.
payment,
yeah. It is uncommon.
because
to
of fiscal prudence by the school boards, and then I don't want it to get it too long-winded, but I want to say that, I appreciate that you all were trying to get onto it like gangbusters, let's pay this thing down. the concern that I have is that that money going towards paying it down is now going towards construction costs, and you've tacked another year on to the end. So how I word that in a very short, brief, succinct way, I don't know.
Does that work?
Did that make sense, what I was saying, Ken?
Yeah.
Does the second sentence is that better now?
Well, that's the start, yeah. I think the whole, the for use and future payments probably has to go.
Yep, for use of future payments would go.
I don't know. This whole thing had to be reworked, I think. I'm not sure how to do it. I think what you're trying to say is that the original budget, you know, the school board was being prudent for the original budget in including that first principal payment. And it's not at all unusual not to make that first principal payment because of their prudence. Then there is the option to transfer that amount to the project or something like that. And that's not a good way to write it, but I'd have to sit down and work
No,
with
but
it
the
for a
school, I mean,
while.
so the school board included this $1.3 million, actually $2 million, including interest, in the original budget article that went before the voters on the 22nd of May.
Right.
What changed that night was what that money was earmarked for. So we moved it from one article to another article. So we moved it from bond payment article to the other expenditure article to give us flexibility coming up on the 11th to actually spend that money on the project. That was just because we were painted into a corner with the way the article was written. So we're continuing to raise that money. We're just now asking the voters to spend that money on the 11th for construction as opposed to a bond principal.
And Diane, could you also fix principal in the bold deferment of the first principal payment? Thank you.
Also over here, I believe.
I'm going to have to work on this. This is the problem with wordsmithing this in a meeting like this, but.
Maybe we'll go on to the next one.
Wait, did you decide what
I
to do
don't know
with
where
that?
we're going with
We're
this.
gonna have to give it another second. Okay, drawdown from the capital reserve fund. This $1.4 million is already appropriated for issues that might arise with both the middle and elementary schools. Some funds, 1.1 million, in this reserve were put aside specifically for the middle school project over the last 3 years by deferring some maintenance. However, the primary responsibility of the remaining 300,000 is for unforeseen issues and expenses, not new construction. After spending the proposed amount on the middle school project, only 175,000 will remain in the fund, an amount that the MSAD 28 business manager has stated is a concern. Do you want me to take you out, Kathy?
I mean, you're welcome to take me out.
I just think that it speaks volumes.
You know, it's a concern for me. I've told the school board, I'm concerned that, you know, because we've been using a lot of the fund balance and potentially there'll be some cash flow issues because we now have 2 very big principal payments that we need to make in the school year. Having said that, you know, my concern was because, you know, we've still got kids in the middle school for 2 years. But that's been a concern for the last 5 years, that we have kids in that middle school, and we could be spending a lot of money on that middle school that we're sort of just throwing away. So it is a concern. You can leave it in there, but it's been a concern for the last 5 or 6 years that we still have kids in that middle school.
Is this getting towards having to get TANs, those tax anticipated notes? Does this work into cash flow in that
Correct.
sense?
Correct, yeah.
And that's, from everything I've gathered, going the TAN route, you just try not to go.
Right, we're trying to avoid that. I'm trying to avoid. So my job is to let the school board know what some of my concerns are and, you know, what the result of their decisions may be, you know. I have no crystal ball as far as what the next couple of years are gonna bring. So I try and give them, you know, whenever I can, I be as conservative as I can and say, this is what may occur.
Keep it moving on.
Outside of that, any,
No,
Matthew?
let's say something.
Quick question, so it's 175K would be in the, what, next year?
Correct.
And then we raise another 175K.
You wanna have him come up,
so it'd
Ken.
be 350K.
Yeah, you need to come up, Matt.
Treat everybody the same.
So I just wanted to say that would leave us 175,000. I'm Matthew Daly, I'm chair of the school board. 175,000 for next year, which we'd add more money, so we'd have 350K. So it would which would be almost plenty
How much
for
would
any
it
sort
put
of
in over
unforeseen.
10 years? How much would it put in over 10 years?
Well,
I mean,
10
my
years, we
point
had
is- my point
$1.7 million.
is, yes, we know more money's going in there every year, but we're talking about right now.
Right, but we're talking about one year, having $175,000 for contingency for 1 year. And if we don't spend any of that, then we have $350,000.
Right, if a frog had wings, so, okay.
I would suggest on that statement to remove however the primary responsibility of, and begin that sentence with, the remaining 300,000 is for unforeseen issues and expenses.
Yeah, I just pulled it up, yeah,
Does that,
You cool with that, Doug?
Yeah, it's fine.
right,
again, I'm trying to
thanks.
be as factual as
Keep it
possible
neutral
here,
and
and
And respectful,
absolutely.
because that
And-
was borderline.
And I want to make sure that Kathy is okay with, if you didn't say that, then I want to take it out.
Yes, and I did say that. I said that at the last meeting, and
Okay.
It's on the
I
record.
actually had said that to the superintendent. It's not, but I often give statements in the most conservative way that I possibly can.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Right, and that's
That's
what we
what
asked her
I'm
to do,
supposed to
that's
do.
her job.
Yeah, we have a finance
so
director like
I-
that, too.
Yeah,
Fund balance. These are non-expected expended funds from previous budgets that can either be used to reduce taxes or be designated for other projects. Rather than use these funds for either of these purposes, the district plans to expend a large portion of these funds, $100,000, towards a middle school construction.
I guess, what is the fund and is the number right, and is it a large portion? I guess would be my questions to make sure we're factual here.
well,
So what's our budgetary fund balance after this?
our budgetary fund balance will be about $800,000.
So this still leaves our budgetary fund balance at $800,000. That's our savings account. That allows us not to have to go to TANs or other financing mechanisms. That's our basic fund balance. So to me, $800,000 on a $13 million budget is an appropriate amount of money to keep.
We have requirements of certain percentages of our,
We don't have that requirement. Our requirement is that we actually cannot go over 3% of our budget in a fund balance without some plan to slowly reduce it.
So you have the opposite
We've got
requirement
the
that we do.
opposite.
We have a.
Ours is very
hold it at
different.
a certain level, and you can't exceed a certain
that's-
You
level.
send us a bill, we send you money.
You collect the money on our
We could strike
behalf.
the word large.
Thank you.
That's what I was going to
I was
ask,
gonna say, I
because
think
100,000
that
is
large
not
is-
necessarily a
that's a
large
value statement.
portion. So, yeah, just expend a
Not
portion of
factual.
these funds. I think that's,
great. Value engineering. This is a term for finding non-essential aspects of the project and cutting them out to reduce the overall cost of construction. Although a possible cut of $2.8 million has been discussed, the school board seems inclined to only cut at maximum $750,000 from the project.
I would disagree with that.
I would disagree with that,
I mean, I would-
that's, we haven't even seen it, so,
That was based on reviewing virtually every one of your meetings that you've had since you got the bids and all of your discussions around your concerns of cutting things out.
I think that number came up as a minimum either way.
Right.
If we took all of the $3 million of either issuing bonds or bond premium, we still were $750,000 short.
Right.
So we were going to have to value engineer at least $750,000.
we were talking minimums and maximums, worst case scenario, best case
The
scenario
other
for
way
each
is
one,
either
yeah.
I guess I didn't observe or hear anyone talking about actually being inclined.
Well, regardless, you have
I'll disagree.
4 board members here right now that
You'll
are.
disagree. You didn't want to cut
I
anything
did- I
from
agree,
the
but
project,
that's-
Peter.
That's my point. The superintendent
Ken.
contradicted me and told me, no, there are areas that have to be cut. She was very clear in her response to me, because I did not want it. I wanted to be more, I would rather be more flexible in the funding than the cutting. So she immediately responded that, in her opinion, there was clearly value engineering or cost-cutting, for Doug's term, which is more accurate, that had to be done, that this needed to be done, whether or not we were in this situation or not, that cost-cutting was just a prudent way and is part of our job to do along this project.
If I remember correctly, she said we need to at least do our due diligence of seeing if we can cut something. That did not lead me to believe that a 10%, a $2.8 million was what you all were inclined to do.
No,
But we
it's-
have not voted on that, and I consistently said, I would like to see us value engineer as much as possible, up to $2.8 million to reduce the impact of the bond premium. So for you to make a blanket statement like that, the school board seems inclined to only cut, we're asking you to take that out.
About a possible cut of $2.8 million has been discussed, although the amount may be less.
Perfect.
Perfect. Any individual aspect of this package taken by itself might be considered, quote, common. That said, bundling these aspects, sorry,
Let's let her catch up a bit, just because.
Yeah.
Good, okay. That said, bundling these aspects together, especially to the degree of which is being proposed, is uncommon. When taken as a whole, this overall proposal will place a significant burden on our taxpayers. This is in addition to the burden we have assumed by passing a bond of $25.2 million for new school construction.
So that seems to me an opinion on your part, and that contributes to the bias of this letter.
Yep. Are there any?
I'm not comfortable with it. I mean, if we're going to make a statement as a select board, and as, like I say, I'm still not convinced that I will support this, but I would rather say something to the effect of, you know, the school board has looked at several various different tools or ways to close the gap, and we would encourage them to consider all of those goals and the best combination possible, something like that.
I guess one of the things that troubled me again about this, and again, I don't mean to sound silly or something, but you know, when I don't understand something or it seems really complicated, I start to get suspicious. And I guess that's what sort of, again, has troubled me about this process. I've heard the presentations, for the average guy, very difficult to understand. And again, when I keep coming back to the numbers, you know, that 25 million, 6 million. So
I agree with you. This whole bond concept is confusing
well, it's
because
more
none
than
of us
just the bond. I mean, it's everything together. I mean, if it was just the bond thing, that'd be one thing. If it was just cost cutting, I would understand that. But it, you know, it seems like you've had to, you know, just.
Well, it reminds me of what you went through with your computer thing. You know, Rick came to you and said, well, we have this huge expense because our computers were hijacked at the town office, and so we have to pull from here and here and here and here
Yeah,
and do this.
yeah.
So it's not dissimilar, Doug.
Well,
But
except that.
Can I just finish? Because we're hearing people out there watching, and they're asking for what is the overall burden to the taxpayers. And I think maybe that's where we can just maybe agree that maybe getting as solid as we can numbers based on varying interest rates and the whole bond thing, but what we're essentially talking about is $100 per $100,000 of value. Am I?
That's what we have already told the taxpayers,
Right,
and
because
that's
people
what's
are asking
already in
that
the
are
budget
watching.
for next year. So it's not an additional $100 per 100,000 over the, in any given year in the budget.
Right, I know, but I wish I could do that in our town budget too, you know, for our roads and Annis Road
But you
Bridge that
kind of
had
do,
to
like
be
you
done. and-
estimate the impact
so-
to taxpayers.
And I just want to jump in here for a minute because Carol mentioned there are people giving
Yeah, they're
comments.
watching and giving
And we
comments.
have Jeff let me know that we've had 25 to 30 comments on the live stream so far, so people are watching our discussion.
36 people watching.
36 people watching right now, so I just want to put that out there to let everybody know that, yes, this is worthwhile doing. People are paying attention, and I think more people will watch it
Yeah,
later.
there's 36 people watching now.
Yeah.
So-
I'm guessing
The
that
people
number
that
will go
aren't
in the
working
hundreds pretty
or
quickly.
can take time
25
out of
people
their
said
day
throw the
that can
bums
work.
out.
Again, we've had like 18 days since all of this stuff happened. So just a quick question. Does anyone disagree with the statement that bundling all of these things together is uncommon? Can anyone point to me any other school district project to where you, every financial tool, not every, but virtually every financial tool at the disposal, virtually every account that you have access to has been touched or altered or utilized to make up a budget gap?
I believe the CSD project was one that created, and it was a long time ago, and I heard the high school, that was over budget. They had to do a lot of cutting. They had to
I thought
come
that
up.
they did significant fundraising. That was in
They
addition
did.
to
They-
other.
They had to. That's why they formed the Friends of the CSD, and they did considerable fundraising. So I don't think any of us were a part of that, so we can't speak to it, but I do know that it was.
Jeff, were you around then?
No, I was around as a citizen.
You weren't on the school board then?
No. The private money added considerably to what the state would allow us to have. So we got a much better high school.
And we got state money on that project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that one,
Yeah, we did.
So the overall burden to the taxpayers as
Well,
far as
that's-
a
I
dollar
mean,
amount?
That's-
Well, I'm just, what I'm trying to
I
get
don't,
at
I don't think
is-
it's uncommon, though. I mean, I think what you're seeing around, like if you, I wonder what Caribou's gonna do. I mean, think about what they're facing, a 25% overage. So I think, we can talk about what's happening in other districts, but we're doing our best right here.
Speaking of Caribou, I mean, I would have been interested to learn about the 6 or 7 others, and I'm sure this is the highest of the bunch perhaps, because that also, on your part, says to the voters, this is of great urgency. I mean, so either leave that 25% out or tell us what the other ones are also coming in over, if you knew. No, your comment about Caribou is 25% over.
Right.
And there are 7 other projects going on. Do we know what they are over?
They haven't gone out to bid yet.
They're about to
They're
go
waiting
bid.
for us.
They're
to
waiting for
say
us.
no.
Yeah, we're holding on to Ledgewood, I think, right
Yeah,
now. Go
I
ahead.
just want to make the comment that the only thing I see here that might be considered uncommon is taking that principal payment and using it towards construction. Everything else here would be used in a typical project, We just don't know about bond premiums, but they happen. Use of capital reserve money, that happens. Use of fund balances happens, value engineering's happened, value engineering happened at the elementary school. I mean, all of these things, except for the principal payment, are things that happen in every single, on the projects I've known about. So.
And Matthew, I don't disagree with you at all. What my comment was about the bundling of them together.
Midco School of Technology and RSU 13 used every one of these tools except raising additional money to go towards the project in the regular budget. So every aspect of this, it may have been different. Midco School of Technology used a capital reserve to buy equipment. That's what they're earmarking for. RSU 13 is raising additional capital reserve and spending it in the current budget for cost overruns. So I guess, in effect,
Jeez, I guess I wish I'd caught that project earlier too.
well, most, I
Because
think
my
we all
question
wish
for
we could.
Peter then would also be, if you do all these things, where's your safety net?
Safety net is planning ahead. And that's where I think that.
Well,
so I-
Let's let him answer the question.
So I think that's where I think you anticipate the sources of revenue, which might be bond premium, which would be capital reserve, which would be fund balance, and you think about that ahead of time. And then you have good partners that are helping you through the process to let you know of what's happening in the market. I think that, to me, the biggest problem with this entire project recently has been the surprise. I think the $6 million overage and being surprised by that was, to me, was the one thing that could have been avoided. I think that, yes, the increase in construction costs have happened in a relatively short amount of time, less than 9 months. But I do believe that we could have been better prepared as a board by our architect and professionals to anticipate that. And I think
Right,
that
but
would.
when I say, though, where's your safety net? I mean, suppose a boiler blows up this afternoon in one of the schools. Suppose this summer, during the hurricane season, we get a bad storm that comes through here and the school is damaged. If we appropriate all this money, where are you going to go to fix any problems?
So the safety net is the capital reserve fund. So there's $175,000 in capital reserve, which would be, half of, which would be 2 boilers, it would be a roof.
Well, with today's construction costs, are you kidding? As you point out, yeah. First of all, good luck getting the plumber.
The plumbers, that's a whole different story. The $800,000 in the fund, in the fund balance is a safety net. And really, if something completely extraordinary happens, the voters are our safety net. And so if something really happens that is catastrophic, we go through the same process of a town meeting, budget meeting, and referendum, because the voters give us authority to spend a certain amount of money, or up to a certain amount of money. That's what the budget process allows us to do. It doesn't say we have to spend it, but it gives us the authority to spend up to a certain amount. Then there's the next layer, and the next safety net, which is the voters. And that's where we go to either a town meeting style, which voters give us authority, or town meeting and referendum, which the referendum just validates the budget meeting. So that's the real safety net.
It seems like your first safety net will be stretched pretty thin if this goes forward, which was sort of my point.
There's insurance coverage too, I presume.
That's right.
For things like that. And there's other funds, there's fuel reserve funds, there's.
Okay.
Where are we at? What are we doing?
So, it sounds like this paragraph, I don't know where you want to go with this one, because it's, the
think it
board
should be
is,
struck.
the board is saying that it is not uncommon to do this.
And I just still disagree, respectfully. That said, I wanna make you comfy, Ken.
Well, that may not be, well, whatever. So, Carol says strike the paragraph. Is the board comfortable with that, or?
I'm not.
I'm not sure I am either.
I'd leave it.
How about this? Any individual aspect of this package taken by itself might be considered common. We agree with that, right? That said, bundling these aspects together, especially to the degree of which is being proposed, could be considered uncommon. Because then that's factually accurate. When taken as a whole, this overall proposal will place a significant burden on our taxpayers. Okay, we'll rewrite that. When taken as a whole, this proposal will place
An additional
burden on our taxpayers.
An additional year. It's an additional year. I think you should be clear on what the burden is. I think you should be specific.
And I also think that we've kind of been relatively clear that if the projections that you all have made turn out not to be exactly how you've made them, that the statement of it's only on the last year is not an accurate statement. If the interest comes in over 3.5, which is higher than what the citizens voted for, so in my opinion, if the interest rate is coming back in at over 3.05, that's an additional annual cost, because you have to pay that additional interest, and there's only one place to get money.
But those are a lot of ifs, Owen. You don't know for sure, so when you're putting
Exactly.
out a letter, like, you can't.
And how can you all then say that it is definitive? If the ifs exist for me, the ifs also exist for you. And there are definitive statements in here.
But we're working with our bond counsel and our financial people. You're making this value judgment sitting here right now, and
No, I'm not. I've observed and watched every
I
meeting you
appreciate
have
that,
had.
but.
Let me make a suggestion here.
When taken as a whole, the overall proposal could place an additional burden on our taxpayers.
And I would have put a comma there and say mainly in the, whatever the last tax year is, like 20,
Well,
34, 35.
You know, again, this thing is so complicated. If the wheels start to come off,
And we haven't even broken ground yet.
And
I'm sorry,
I'm-
Kathy, go ahead.
Personally, I'm okay with Doug's
Yeah.
change. I think that's accurate and can be, and part of this is to create questions for the 11th, because I would like to see these questions being answered in person if the taxpayer has them. So not, I mean, I would prefer attaching a dollar amount to that, $8 per 100,000, whatever the number might be, but we don't have that number. So I'd like to see this question being asked on the 11th.
Kathy?
It's okay. I don't think it's going to add to the conversation.
Did you get that?
No, an additional burden.
An
No,
additional,
Significant comes out.
yeah, an additional burden.
okay.
And I like the last sentence, but it could be struck because it's just stating the obvious that we already approved a $25.2 million bond.
That's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Good, next paragraph.
Yeah, let her,
Sorry.
yeah, give her a chance.
No.
This is not my document, and you guys are obviously in charge of this, but I do take exception to this sentence that says could be considered uncommon. There's no foundation that you've really laid to say that, I mean, it could be considered common, could be that sentence as well. So if you're going to leave that in, I think you need to prove that statement exists in some sort of unique and exotic way. And there's just nothing in here that says that that is something that is true. So.
Okay, next paragraph. All of us want to see a successful and positive resolution to the situation we find ourselves in. Some of us on the select board have young children in the school district that will be the first class to use the new school. However, we feel the approach the district has taken to resolve this issue is fiscally irresponsible and will leave our school district financially fragile. That one I know is charged. That was definitely the paragraph that I thought was probably the strongest that I had included in there. I still feel that way. However, I am comfortable tweaking it or striking it.
I would disagree with the points in it. I mean,
Yeah,
from
I
my,
would too.
from my observation from another school system, this is probably one of the most fiscally conservative districts that I've seen. And
I'd say leave the first sentence and strike everything after.
then I would disagree with the financially fragile aspect.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would,
Yeah.
I
I
would
would
disagree
agree,
with
Mark.
that. I
I think
would
that
Leave
disagree
the
with that.
first
sentence
sentence,
and-
strike that, strike the next paragraph, and have it go straight to below our links to the recent news articles and school board meetings.
Well, I'm not sure I want to do that.
All right, I'm cool with that.
Not sure you want to do what?
However, we feel that the approach the district has taken to resolve this issue is complicated. Can anyone disagree with that?
I don't.
All right, now let me build on that, but it's going to take me a minute. Take to resolve the issue is complicated.
And does deviate from.
No, I don't want to even
you
say
don't wanna
that.
say that.
Is complicated and comes with no guarantees or something like that. We can strike the district financially fragile.
If you're going to do that, that's,
We're gonna lose
Again,
Ken.
well,
We're gonna lose Ken if you do that.
you may lose me anyway.
I
but,
know.
But if you're going to do that, then, you know, if you say it's complicated, I would say comma, if we're going to make a statement, then I would say, and we urge all citizens to, you know,
Make up their own minds.
do their due diligence, something
Okay.
like that, to
Well,
say something
all right.
like, you
Well, we
know.
do that in that bottom paragraph. That bottom paragraph is encouraging and it shows all the links following that. We just encourage you to view the discussions and get better educated.
Who's the "we"
Who's doing that?
in the first paragraph? I mean, the first sentence.
Did you just do that?
Who's doing that?
I don't think they want to
Where?
get rid of that.
We want to know who the "we" is just before "find ourselves in."
Wait just a second.
Well, we gotta go back through this too, because you wrote this originally as though both boards were gonna be sending it, so there are some tense issues, I think, with that.
No, the only thing would be,
We.
where?
Who's the "we"?
The we is the community.
The problem is I
Yeah, well,
started.
that was the question.
Oh,
That's-
sorry,
yeah.
I was
That's
told,
what-
the we is the
They decided
community.
that-
Okay, so that's, I would,
Because
I would,
you all find yourself in an awkward situation of trying to figure it
I was
out.
gonna say the "we" refers to us, the board,
And
school board.
oh, no, and then the community finds itself
But
in
you're
an
writing the
awkward.
letter, the "we" should be the select board,
Yes, correct.
not
Or-
you're speaking for the
Or say the
community.
or say the community.
Or say the
That's my-
community.
Yeah, I
But
think
not
that's,
you speaking for anybody. When you say "we," that means you're the voice of
I would just change "we" to the
the
community.
community.
Do we have something to say after
Do I have to put
however?
that back?
Do you understand what I mean?
I see what you're
It's a
saying.
grammatical.
Because I still am viewing it as the bigger, broader we, but I get what you're saying, thank you.
Oh, my fingers were in the wrong.
And they said to delete that second sentence in that paragraph. They said to just keep the first,
The district is taken to resolve
Right?
this issue.
Well, no.
well,
then-
Doug is going back to saying it's
goes back to-
complicated.
sorry.
That the district is taken to resolve this issue is complicated. Now, Ken, you wanted to,
Well, and then
Say
the-
urge people to-
we urge, the voters to pay close, I don't know how
Well,
you,
it gets.
It's in the
it
last
says it-
paragraph.
maybe you can grab it. Are we taking out this next paragraph,
Yeah,
the
you-
district?
I
So just
can-
take that whole
Well,
paragraph out?
Doug, do you have any issues with that?
no,
Because we already said that
even though I
about,
think it's true,
well, but we already said it.
So Diane, you can take, the district has taken it upon itself to use virtually every financial tool. You can strike that whole one page, one sentence paragraph.
All of this?
Yep.
From down here?
Yep.
Okay.
it's about as much fun as a kidney stone.
The difficult part is that
It's not the stone that's passing it.
As near as I can remember from my many years being around here and involved with town government, no board has ever come up and questioned. They've always just gone along with the program, and here we are questioning things and getting ready to make a statement, and it's not comfortable for you, and it's not comfortable for us. So at least we're trying to come together on some level to put something out there for people. So I can
I think
appreciate
we
your
appreciate that.
uncomfortableness, and it's not necessarily good for us either, but, because we do realize that the 68% voted in favor of it, but there are still those that didn't. So we're trying to do a little due diligence.
Yeah.
I think the more the boards can work together.
Yes.
Can we all
Absolutely,
go to
and-
the same people and ask them for money?
Let me make one
As
more
long as it's
possible
done in a
edit here to
respectful
try to
way,
fix this
I think
thing.
we're all on board with that.
I would grab the last sentence in the last paragraph there, "we encourage all voters," et cetera, and put that right after the complicated sentence.
Yeah.
And then follow on with below our links. So if you just grab that whole sentence and then cut it and paste it up there after complicated, and you have to get rid of the
June 12th.
the June 12th
Yeah.
reference, right?
Oh,
Who's taking control?
Big Brother lives.
And his name is Jeff.
yeah.
And give me a backspace there.
Does that make, that's my suggestion, and like I say, I'm not totally sure that I'm gonna vote for this anyway, but at least, I think the conversation has been helpful, I will say that.
And Diane, if you can strike the June 12th so from polls all the way back to and. So just say June 11th, middle school gymnasium, period. Boom.
And then we've got,
Can I just say, it's a district vote on June 11th, because it's important clarification.
join us for the district vote? Okay, so instead of "to," put "for the district."
No, the next sentence down. There you go.
No, up.
I don't know where you guys are.
I'm sorry, district meeting.
Join us
District meeting.
for the district vote, or district.
Right there.
Yeah, because that's what it says on the warrant. It's a district meeting.
For the district meeting And then we have to,
And then strike vote, or
put and vote.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And then we have some things we skipped over on the way through this, which is the bond premium paragraph and the first principal paragraph.
Wait, what's up?
What do we want to do with this stuff?
Am I in the right spot?
I could live with striking the last sentence.
Of the bond premium one?
Should it say 20 years or 21 years? Because really we're talking
But I
about
think the
extending
rest of it
it
is factual.
21 years. right?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
all right with
The
that.
bond premium they've added.
So did you get that, Diane?
Okay.
The last sentence of that bond premium paragraph, a bond premium of this magnitude, et cetera, strike that.
Get rid of all that?
Yeah.
There was a principal payment was the other.
It ought to be 21. That should be 21 years instead of 20. Because that is, they're increasing it from 20 to 21.
Over the life of the bond, parentheses, 21 years.
So should we change it down below as
Well, the other one says, well, we still have to wordsmith this principles paragraph. We left this behind, too. I think the question was is it an uncommon to spend it for current construction? That was this phrase, I think, that, this is the one where we were gonna say something that the school board had budgeted to make the first principal payment during the first year and as a matter of fiscal prudence or something like that, but, you know, now that, it's, and I don't know how to do that, and
So this was somehow budgeted for?
It was
This was not
budgeted.
a surprise, and
well, their budget was to make the first payment to include principal, which is not always done. In fact, most of the time, I don't believe it is done. I know in our town bonds, we've had, you know, like sewer construction, the first payment doesn't include any principal. So the board was being proactive in their description in doing that, to reduce the overall cost, and now they're saying, well, okay, we can change that and do what was common, and since the 1.3 was already budgeted for spending anyway, they can put that into the project.
So on our
Instead of it
book,
going to principal, it's going to construction costs.
And that's what,
adding
that's what
another year on
extends the
end.
bond by a year, is that then you have another payment.
goes to construction
Another
costs.
year. And the question is, it's, you know, what's common, what's uncommon? I mean, I'd have to work on this for a little while, but what time is it?
for the first principal payment.
So just talking out loud,
not
loud.
just
While it
saying
is not unusual to defer the first principal payment, the school has chosen to use that first principal payment towards construction costs, therefore adding an additional year onto the life of the bond.
So just talking out loud,
Yeah.
this was not the school decision. This was actually a voter decision at the May 22nd budget meeting. So the voters already approved the spending of $1.3 million on construction costs as opposed to raising it for bond principal.
So that decision
was what the-
that decision's already made.
That was already, that was,
Is
that
that
was done.
decision completely made or partially made?
It was actually totally made
Well, it's the-
as part of the budget. And that will be confirmed
And the
in the referendum.
Well, you think it'll be confirmed, so the
Possibly.
voters have not yet confirmed this.
Correct. But the voters, because the budget meeting is the budget meeting, that's the budget that's been approved. The validation is just the validation of that budget, you're right, and it could be voted down for any number of reasons. not just that.
So should it say voted in the May 22nd
I
meeting?
would just somehow refer to that, this concept was approved by voters at the May 22nd budget meeting. I think there's, I mean, I'm certainly willing to acknowledge that raising money in an operating budget for construction is the uncommon piece of this. And you said that, and I agree with that.
I guess, but I'm struggling with how quick all of this has gone. I mean,
You're not the only one.
prior to that
No choice.
May 22nd budget meeting, I mean, how much lead time was the community given to know that at their budget meeting, this type of stuff was actually going to happen? And we did have a vast, I mean, Marcy and I went to the year before, and how many of this? There were like 12 of us?
Yeah, I,
Typically a highly attended meeting. And there's
Right.
decisions
She should come to the
You
microphone.
gotta come up, if you're gonna speak, you have to come up and identify yourself for the folks at home.
yeah, I think in a simpler form, alls we did at the budget meeting was move the money from one cost center to another. So at the June 11th meeting, we could give the voters the opportunity to say whether or not we could take that money and use it for construction. So I think at the, from my point of view, alls we did is at the May 22nd budget meeting was move that money from the debt service construction cost center into the other cost center. So in fact, we could then use that money for construction if approved at the June 11th meeting.
So maybe we can thread it this way and give me your tweaks. While it is not unusual to defer the first principal payment, oh, I had it and then I lost it. It was going to be on the moving aspect of it, so showing that it's being moved from one purpose to another purpose. Oh, do you have something that's going to make this make sense?
Well, let's try this. Again, speaking out loud from reading from my chicken scratchings that nobody else will be able to read. It is not unusual to defer the first principal payment. The school board originally budgeted to make the first principal payment in the first year of the bond to reduce costs. But these funds were transferred to construction costs at the whatever date
May
meeting it was,
22nd.
May 22nd meeting.
To be further validated at the June 11th meeting. So that's what, to Kathy's point.
So
Actually-
and this is just a thought on my part. While it's not unusual to defer the first principal payment, have it known that this will extend the 20-year bond an additional year, and you're just striking it as uncommon to spend it for current construction, just taking that little bit out, and you're still being fairly factual.
And just, I mean, I think that maybe our intents on wordsmithing this are slightly different. My intent on crafting this document and how my wordsmithing is to be more clear to folks about the impact to them versus some of the mechanics. Primarily because you all have done a great job of laying out the mechanics and laying out what these certain things mean. And so what I'm trying to do, or my intent anyway, was to try to focus more on the impact to the taxpayers. So though I think this conversation around the 22nd and the moving it from one spot to another is all factually accurate and makes sense, I primarily want folks to know that there was budgeted monies that were for a specific purpose. Those monies have now been moved to another spot to be used for other purposes, and it adds an additional year onto the end of the bond.
What if we just take the middle sentence out? That becomes a factual statement. This will take the first principal payment of 1.3 million, use these funds toward construction rather than paying down the debt. This will extend the 20-year bond by an additional year.
Will be used for construction purposes if approved at the June 11th district meeting. Because we still need to get voter approval to use that for construction costs.
Doesn't that kind of underpins this whole document, is that none of that stuff will happen. Well, actually, I
That's
mean,
fine.
a ton of this stuff could happen. You all are, out of the kindness of your hearts, going to the voters for certain things.
I think it's not out of kindness, I think it's out of the right thing to do. This is,
right
from every
I'm
council
cool with
we've had,
doing that.
this is the proper
Alice
methodology.
says okay to cut that middle sentence out. Are you guys okay with that? Just so that it becomes a factual statement. And if we need to add the budget validation or the district meeting.
District meeting, yeah.
Well, it is not up until current construction?
Yeah, take that out.
Hello? Sorry, it keeps getting stuck.
And then does anybody else have anything else on this?
I'm wondering, on this particular paragraph, or on the overall document,
The overall document, or,
I'm wondering if under where my name is mentioned, in the next paragraph, draw down the capital reserve, where it says, after spending the proposed amount on the middle school project, only $175K will remain in the fund, an amount that the MSAD 28 business manager has stated is a concern, and the school board will take this into consideration when evaluating the funds and how much value engineering to use. Because when I expressed my concern, I said you should keep this in mind as you're, determining how much value engineering you're going to use. And so that's sort of only half of the conversation.
How about just adding on, has stated is a concern to the school board?
But what she's saying is it doesn't give the full picture as to what that concern was, and so that could be misleading. And if you're going
Yeah,
to quote
and-
our business manager, we want to make sure that
well,
she's comfortable with that.
What you would say then is,
Yeah.
amount that the MSA has stated is a concern, and she suggests that
And
the
she-
school board, however you want to word that.
Right, consider this when,
Consider this carefully, when,
should consider this when selecting the right combination of value engineering and other funding sources.
okay. Diane?
Where do you
That
want to
makes
start?
sense, Peter?
We got the intent behind it.
And the paragraph, draw
So-
down the capital reserve fund.
Right at the very end.
Yeah,
af-
that's where I
after
am.
Is a
Concern.
concern.
Oh, I can see.
Okay, right at the end, yep.
And it's Kathy's quote, so.
Right, and has advised the school board to take this into consideration when determining the correct use of value engineering and other funding sources. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm thinking something along the lines of, well, again, talking out loud. Because I,
And others.
And other sources.
Make the value go.
Strike
Take the
valued.
valued out.
Sorry.
Can you read that?
No, and
She can't
has
read it.
advised the school
Can you
board.
enlarge it?
Or could somebody read it
And
to me?
has-
And has
advised-
advised the school board to take this into consideration when determining the correct use of valued, I think it's just value engineering.
Yeah.
And other sources, other revenue sources?
Other funding sources.
Other funding sources?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you take your period after concern out and make your A
Right.
small a.
Yeah,
Is that- is that-
One thing at a
Does that make
time.
sense, Pete?
Yeah, it just did that automatically.
yeah.
I mean, the overall picture.
Well, you
it's-
gotta take your
Take
period.
the period
take
out
your
after
period out.
concern there. And then at the very end, other funding sources.
This keyboard is so small.
So at the beginning of the sentence,
It is.
instead of after spending, assumes that it will be spent. this doesn't mandate that we have to spend it in this way, so if the,
Where are you?
Where is it?
so
the middle
right in the middle of the,
paragraph, after
beginning of
spending.
that,
Do you want if spent?
so if the full amount of the if the full amount were
Is
spent on the middle school
If the full amount
project,
is spent.
only 175,000
If the
will
full
remain.
300,000 were used on the middle school project, only, so. No, come down. Or it says after spending.
Yep.
Go in there and take out,
After spending.
start that sentence, you know, so after spending, the proposed comes out.
And it's really, if the full 1.4 million were spent,
Well, the 1.1 we know is gonna be,
well, we don't.
Well, we don't.
We know it's available.
And it was set aside specifically for this purpose.
So what should it say?
let's see, 1.4, the 1.1 is, the remaining 300,000 is for.
If the full amount,
Of the capital
You could just,
reserve.
you could just do,
Capital
if the
reserve
full amount is
If the full-
approved,
No,
if the
it-
full
No,
amount is
spent
approved,
is
only
spent.
175K will remain in the fund.
if it were spent.
If
If
it's
it were
spent.
We don't know that it's all going to be spent.
Again, this is
Approved,
setting,
do you want approved and
Yeah.
spent?
No,
No.
approved.
Well, because
Approved and spent, yeah.
yeah, that might.
approved
Yeah.
and
Covers
spent.
both.
Yeah.
Approved and spent.
So if the full amount is approved and spent, cut the middle school project, because that's what we're talking about. Only
I'd
a-
leave it, I'd leave it.
You'd leave it?
And-
Okay.
And the problem here now is that
Remain the fund.
people are gonna look at this and say,
Period.
where's the 175,000 coming from, and what's the math doesn't add up.
It does, it would add up if we said, the proposal is for an additional 175,000 to be appropriated, leaving 175,000 remaining, but then,
25,000, yeah.
125, thank you. But then it gets to be a wicked unwieldy paragraph that's
Yeah.
just kind of long and,
Since the paragraph head says draw down the capital reserve, that's what's left. You don't need to explain it.
Should we make him come to the mic too?
It's a peanut gallery.
It's really hard for me to read it. I guess
Do you want to go
I-
sit up
Let me
there?
go closer. Yeah.
It's hard for her to read the red.
you know,
I
to
feel like
be in-
I feel like we're overcomplicating this paragraph.
Yeah.
It feels like this is the problem with wordsmithing is,
They're suggesting spending an extra, where is it? I don't have the number. Capital reserve.
You could say in the future,
Where?
instead of the full amount,
Because there's another amount here someplace, and it's not referenced.
right?
You know, to be an explosive ordnance person, you have to not be colorblind. It's a little fun fact.
I knew that.
so how much is in the capital reserve account right now?
I actually thought we had more than that.
Well, that's gonna bring it down to zero. If we use the 1.4, it brings it down to zero, and we're raising 175 in next year's budget, which is gonna leave 175.
So is that the proposal?
Right.
Oh,
Oh,
I
okay,
guess I
okay, then it makes- it
hadn't
makes sense.
fully
For some
grasped.
reason I
So there's
thought-
gonna be like a half a second to where there is literally zero in that account.
Correct.
That starts to make more sense, and I understand why you say it's a concern. Thank you.
Okay. Okay,
Well, that's close enough then.
yeah, at this point.
How do we feel about this?
I think we've spent enough time on it.
I very much appreciate you all working with us to better refine this. I'm not saying that you should welcome this statement with open arms, because I feel like it's still probably not what you would want, but I really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us and helping us work on this document.
Well, what we do want is, we all want people to come and voice their opinion and let us have a discussion about this, because it's a concern, as you stated in the letter, the proposed letter, and we need input. You know, we have quickly come up with these ideas through some, I think, really creative thinking. And to me, I mean, I'm incredibly impressed with how fast they've done this and how much it makes sense from a financial and fiscal standpoint, coming in from, you know, I do this every day in a different district, but this really is great. It's been a great process for me to watch.
Ellen, and one of the things that is not in this letter, and I don't want to get into adding any more at this point.
But don't say it then.
But I need to say it because it's an important piece of the whole thing. Yes, the project came in over budget. We have to cut some costs and raise some revenue to meet in the middle, and I think that's what everybody's trying their hardest to do. But I think it's important for the voters to know that if, for some reason, this doesn't go through, and we're looking at deferring the project for another couple of years, that in a couple of years, our costs are going to go up that much more, and we're going to get less building for it. I think that's really a critically important piece of information, and like I say, it would be better if it was in there, but at this point, I'm not going to.
And we'd also be 2 years closer to the high school coming off the books.
But still, it would cost more money.
Understood.
So I just want to make sure that that's understood, and because in my opinion, that I think the board has done as best they could in a very, very difficult situation. And I can imagine that you guys have had a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of long nights and things of that nature. So I just need to get that out there.
Thanks, Ken.
Owen?
I went to the ribbon cutting for the Joint National Guard, Air National Guard Task Force Camp Chamberlain, where Mary Beth Van, can't pronounce her last name, was also the owner's rep. And I understand that their construction timeline is different, and the construction costs and tariffs and steel, et cetera. But they were actually able to bring theirs in under budget. It was 101,000 square feet. It was $37 million. They came in under budget. And when I talked with the colonel that was overseeing it, he said there's 3 things you're looking for: quality product, on time, and under budget. Now, we foregoed one of those. We foregoed on time. Now, I understand they just cut the ribbon, so the 9 months, et cetera, but he was saying that they were able to produce a quality product under budget because they spent a little more time being methodical, going over, trying to be clever, not in the how do we get more money to build this stuff, but how can we find space adjacencies? How can we stack our subs in a certain way that shows a little cost saver? They got their change orders down to 1%. So I just think it was interesting. And so, though I don't disagree when folks say the longer you take, because yes, that's what everything goes up. Inflation goes up, and it goes at variable rates. I understand all of that. But I just thought it was very interesting to see this state-of-the-art, next generation with all the security elements and all the whiz bangers and go gadgets, and they were able to do it under budget.
I think that's great, and kudos to them using our taxpayer money so wisely. I would just say that it sounds like they did a lot of value engineering when they were talking about the change orders and getting those down to 1% and all the other things that they're doing, and that's really what we're looking at, too.
Well, the timeframe was.
Yes, and the time
was
frame is
too,
different.
so
And then I would also add, school construction is more expensive because of the fire marshal regulations. So you just, I'm not sure it's comparing apples to apples, but I appreciate what you're trying to say, so.
Okay. So at this point, I would await a motion on this statement.
I move that we submit this revised document to the local media for print and online publication, signed on by the select board.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
I'm sorry, I
Go ahead, Carol.
meant to ask this before. Could you reread a fresh copy so we know what, there's been so many changes.
We start at the top, if we can just,
Call the vote.
That's a good idea. Pardon me?
Call the vote.
Well, Carol is
Have a
asking.
motion and a second.
Reread it, okay, well,
It's fine.
so you're moving, I'm not done discussing yet.
All right, you keep on discussing.
And if my discussion has to include reading this, then I'll.
Well, I've already
then
called
I'll-
the vote,
then I'll
so-
read it. You can't, call the vote requires a vote. That's called previous question, requires a two-thirds vote.
Understood that.
Okay. And it also requires a second, which I haven't heard yet.
I think I did.
Okay. So a special MS 8028 district meeting on June 11th, we have decisions to make regarding the future of our middle school impact taxpayers. One of the decisions, how to best deal with the new middle school, and I apologize for going fast. It recently came back from bid 26%, 5.8 million over budget, regardless of how individual members of the Rockport, Camden should come out of there.
Thank you.
See, it was a reason we did this. Whereas individual members of the Rockport Select Board, got to take the S off there, voted on the original bond. All of us support a robust educational experience for the youth in our
Municipality.
or community. How about community?
Perfect.
Let's put community in there, because we do care about the kids in Camden, too. The proposed changes include, let me get this thing back here. Did we miss something here? Okay. Proposed changes include a bond premium of up to $3 million. This function comes with higher interest rates at taxpayer expense over the life of the bond, 21 years. These additional interest payments could exceed $1 million.
Total?
Pardon?
As opposed to 1 million per year? Is that, maybe it's clear to you?
Over the life of
Over
the
the
bond, I
life of
think,
the bond.
I think it says that,
It's,
yeah.
yeah.
Deferment of the first principal payment, this will take the first principal payment of 1.3 million, use these funds, those funds toward construction rather than paying down the debt. This will also extend the 20-year bond by an additional year. Draw down the capital reserve fund, this 1.4 million dollars. Okay, this $1.4 million is already appropriated for issues that might arise with both the middle and elementary schools. Some funds, 1.1 million in this reserve, were put aside specifically for the middle school project over the last 3 years by deferring some maintenance. No, that's okay, the dollar sign is there. I was having trouble reading, that was me. The remaining 300,000 is for unforeseen issues and expenses, not new construction. If the full amount is approved and spent on the middle school project, only 175,000 will remain in the fund, an amount the MSAD 28 business manager has stated is a concern and has advised the school board to take this into consideration when determining the correct use of value engineering and other funding sources. Is that still, did Kathy have to leave? Oh, no.
No, she's over there,
Okay,
so she
she's
can see.
reading. Okay. Wave at me if you think that's not okay. Fund balance, these are non-expended funds from previous budgets that could either be used to reduce taxes or be designated for other projects. Rather than use these funds for either of these purposes, the district plans to expend a portion of these funds, $100,000, toward the middle school construction. Value engineering, this is a term for finding non-essential aspects of the project and cutting them out to reduce the overall cost of construction. Although a possible cut of $2.8 million has been discussed.
There's two all those
Yeah,
in
the
there.
amount,
The
the
amount.
actual amount may be less, I think. Where'd it go?
Right, oh.
Question.
No.
Sorry.
There you go.
Value
Right
engineering
there.
right there.
So take out the second although, and I would put the actual amount may be less. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Right here?
Yeah, take out that although, and then after the put actual. Any individual aspect of this package taken by itself might be considered common. That said, bundling these aspects together, especially to the degree which is being proposed, could be considered uncommon. When taken as a whole, this overall proposal could place an additional burden on our taxpayers. This is in addition to the burden we have assumed by passing a bond of $25.2 million for new school construction. All of us want to see a successful and positive resolution of the situation we find ourselves in. Some of us on the select board, I think I got an S there, have young children in the school district that will be the first class to use the new school. However, we feel the approach the district has taken to resolve this issue is complicated.
So I don't mind taking, when there were other younger select board members in other towns, that sentence made sense. I'm happy to keep it in, but I think if you went, all of us want to see a successful and positive resolution to the situation. Oh, and we had issues with we, didn't we?
Yeah.
Just want you to
I think
define,
it's okay.
Who is we?
Yeah, who was we? Where
This
I was
is-
speaking
The
more
select
as
board?
this
the
is
general
this is we
community.
select board,
Select
that's
board.
issue.
So,
That's clear.
yeah.
So what are you saying, Owen?
I think it's fine to have
Say
the young
one of us on
children.
the select board has
Okay.
small.
I mean, I
That's
think
fine.
that's important.
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
We encourage all voters in Camden Rockport to review the discussions had by the school boards. They can make up their own minds and join us for the district meeting.
I guess I would put in there too, had by the school board and this select board. 'Cause this, and we've invested 3 hours of our time here, so.
They can make up their own minds and join us for the district meeting and vote on June 11th at 6 PM in the Camden Rockport Middle School Gymnasium. Below are links. We appreciate the district transparent. And I'm assuming that
You-
those links are,
You could take the comma out after school board up there.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right at the top.
First
Diane,
sentence.
where it says
Second line.
School board and the select board, there's a comma there between them. You can take that out.
Do you want to add a link in for this live stream?
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think it would be a good
Any
idea. So,
current-
We'll have to know what that is before we get it out.
Jeff, that takes you just a couple of minutes, right?
It'll cost you.
It's already
Yeah,
available.
it's already.
I can
Okay.
I can-
We're
I can
still in
get
the,
it myself.
we have the motion on the floor. We've read the article over. I
You said
really
we didn't have
appreciate.
a second on it.
We had a motion on the original motion, we had a second. We didn't have a motion, on the previous question motion, we didn't have a second. Because calling the question requires a second. At any rate, in discussion here, I appreciate the discussion. I think it's been very fruitful this morning. I am going to vote against the motion, just because I feel that there should be a separation between the school board and the select board on this. I do think that we've improved the document dramatically. And like I say, I think the positive aspect of this is I think we've had a robust discussion that I think has been very useful. And I hope that the school board feels that way as well. And I really appreciate you guys coming on such short notice and everybody who came and spoke, and Linda for moral support. So I really appreciate that. Does anybody else have any comment on the motion before we vote?
Ken, I've got a huge amount of respect for you. And I don't want to put the Rockport Select Board on there if you don't, I would, I guess, prefer putting Owen Casas, Doug Cole, Mark
No,
Kelly.
this board acts as a whole. You know, when the board votes on an action, it goes out as a whole, and not all votes are unanimous. That's just the way it is. I feel a lot better about the statement than I did coming in, I have to tell you that, because I think we did a lot of work on it. For me, it's just a matter of the separation of the two boards and the responsibilities and things of that nature, and the precedent is more what I'm speaking about. So if the board votes 3-1, that's a board action. That's the way it goes, and we can't all be on the winning side of every vote.
And will that say that in the signature? Board voted 3-1?
That would be up to, I mean, we'll see what the vote is, but
Yeah.
I think the media will probably pick up on it, I would guess.
I would hope so.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, and by our rules, we have to call the roll. Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Casas?
Yes.
Dr. Cole?
Yes.
And Mr. McKinley votes no. That's a 3-1 vote, the motion passes. I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Liaison reports or something?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
From the
All in
manager's
favor?
report?
Thank you all very much. I know it was
Thank you.
not a comfortable morning for everybody.